So, like, what I love is, like, this tells a total.
Okay, so it's 9 o'clock and we're going to start. I'm hoping Jerry is going to make sure we do the live stream. So if you just want to say thank you for coming. It's, good to see familiar faces and new faces, so thank you. We're going to do a quick round of, usually we do something more extensive as a welcome, but we're going to just do your name and your position in your district. Okay, and the reason we're doing that is we have Megan from assessment, we have, two other colleagues from special ed related to an onslaught of questions I got during enrollment around dual services for English learners, which is a civil rights issue and is an ESSA as well, that English learners who are assessed and then followed in relationship to their needs, they have their civil right to dual services. So you can't be waiting until you think that they're English proficient, right? Because that might be 6 years or something like that. Okay, so we're just gonna go. Come on up. Make sure you get all the handouts. So we're just going to go around, and so my name is Christella Estrada, and I'm the education specialist for Title III, which is a federal program, and it's connected to supporting. It's actually the responsibility. The feedback that we got from ESSA was, from the Department of Ed, was pretty clear. The question was, and they weren't happy about it, and then we did an adjustment in relationship to the peer review comments. How is the state agency going to provide technical assistance, feedback, and support for LEAs to ensure that English learners have access to grade-level content in the classroom? Not like theoretically, in folders or on whatever, I don't know. So based on that, we have we've been able to get amazing teams across the agency, from teaching and learning, content specialists, from special ed, from assessment department. So we have a really substantial team. And we also invite people to be peer reviewers. And we'll hear a little bit about the peer review experience as well. So why don't we go around, and so your name, your position, and the district. Okay, we'll start with my esteemed colleagues from special ed. That's all you do.
Okay. Okay. I'm Kim Fratto, and I am a coordinator in the Special Education Services section. And I do a lot of work around English learners with disabilities and all students with disabilities, and access to core instruction, general education, and gen ed peers.
I'm Jennifer Slade, and I'm also a coordinator in special ed, and I'm over the monitoring and compliance area.
No, it's on. The red light. You just have to look at the red light.
I'm Larry Abraham. I'm the Federal Programs Director at Tooele County School District.
And I'm Odie Kanika, Odie like the Garfield's dog in the cartoon. And I'm the EL Secondary Coordinator at Tooele School District.
Welcome. I think this is your first time.
It's my first time. I'm so excited.
Okay, everybody say welcome on 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Gracias. All right, so I am Stephanie Rowley. I am the elementary, K through 3 coordinator for Tooele School District, and just loving it so far.
First time. Yep. Welcome.
Welcome.
Betty Jimenez, I'm the ALS coordinator for Salt Lake City School District.
Not first time.
No.
Okay.
And I'm Hannah Delata. I'm the secondary ELD specialist for Salt Lake City School District.
First time. And my nickname for her is Woody. Now, there's a story I'll tell you after. I'm not going to tell you it now. Okay. Yes, welcome. Welcome.
I'm Peggy Patterson, and I'm the ALS Director and Language Arts Director for Salt Lake City School District. Been at the meetings, but not as the ALS Director. So kind of first time, kind of not.
Yes. She's in between.
I'm Matt Merkley, and I am the EL Director at Entheos Academy.
So this is Entheos, so welcome, Matt.
I'm Shelley Hayes. I'm with American Prep Academy. That's my district and my school. Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of things: school counselor, social worker, and Title III 6-9 compliance something team member. There you go.
Whoa. Well, welcome. I think it's the first time, and I need to see you afterward. Okay, cool.
I'm Dinah Scott. I'm the ESL specialist at the Washington County School District in St. George.
Dinah is our frequent flyer traveler who comes up, and then spends time. So we really appreciate Randy and Washington for making sure that Dinah gets here safely on her, what is it? Is it Delta? SkyWest, yeah. So thank you for being here.
I'm Robin Clement, the Federal Programs Director for CASH.
I'm Julie Payne, and I'm the ESL facilitator, Federal Program Facilitator for CASH.
So I'm going to say something just a little bit about CASH. The University of Utah course that I'm teaching, which is a certificate program, and it's a competency-based program because now we have the approval to do competency-based. There are actually, I think, 4 or 5 from CASH that are doing really interesting work in relationship to gathering evidence to demonstrate competency based on the TESOL standards and the actual classroom embedded work that they're doing with their students. So it's pretty impressive. And there's a seat up here. Okay, great.
Okay. I'm Lynette Johnson. I'm the Student Services Director from San Juan School District.
So this is Lynette's first time, and she's, really? With Title III? With Title III? San Juan. So how did you get up here? Whoa. Okay, let's talk afterward about, you driving. No, we have to work something out. That is a long drive. Thank you for being here. We should talk afterward, too.
I'm Promise Larson. Oh, I'm pretty loud. I'm Promise Larson. I'm from Davis School District, and I'm over Latinos in Action and our secondary ESL program.
I'm Connie Ziegler, Davis School District Elementary ESL Coordinator.
Okay, hold on a minute. So the assistant superintendent yesterday, when I talked with him, John Zerbach, some of you might know him, he called me up because he had to tell me based on the data about graduation rate last year for English learners, it's for Davis it's 89%.
Oh, nice.
So thank you for your work.
Danelle Muir, I'm here representing Access, which is the advisory committee to the State Board on issues of equity.
Now, if you don't know about the Access Committee, it's a really significant committee. It took the place of CMAC, which was the advisory board, to Salt Lake, to the school board. But some of the work that they've done has been incredibly impressive because they look at board rule as well as other issues related to equitable access. And they've actually caught quite a few things and have written letters to the board even after the board has passed certain policies. So we should give her like a round of applause and a hoot or something like that. Because they really work to benefit, the kids who are the most disenfranchised. So they do good work. Okay, next person.
Not working.
It's red.
Okay. Sorry. I'm Lori Rasmussen. I'm from Weber School District. I'm the assistant superintendent and oversee the Title III program. So I'm new to this.
Okay. Welcome. Welcome. And she also emails me and asks really good questions. So she's not afraid to ask questions.
No, I will be asking a lot.
Well, that's good. That's why we have these index cards.
Thank you. I'll have a whole stack.
I'm Beverly Herman. I'm the Title III Administrator in Canyons District, newly replacing Annalise here, but I've been here before as a teacher specialist. Well, no one can replace Annalise, understand that, but,
Yeah, I'll just say one thing about, because Canyons is up next in November for a school visit.
the job. No, I'm just kidding.
And they have been so incredibly responsive and welcoming and thoughtful, that it makes a huge difference, because then the visits go like really well and there are no glitches. Because if you
heard that, right?
So if you have a team and there are glitches at schools, then it doesn't really doesn't create a welcoming feeling for the team that's like spending their time at your school. So thank you for what you and Karen have already done. I really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Sandra Jalovich-Motes, or JM, and I'm the Executive Director for Equity and Access for Ogden School District.
Do you want to say just one thing about, so she was a peer reviewer with me. Do you want to just say one thing about it?
Well, besides the fact that Backman Elementary that I got to see did some amazing things in their classrooms, the whole process was very meaningful, because I'm new to my position last year, and it gave me some insights that I took back to Rhonda, who's down here. She'll introduce herself in a little bit, about how we're addressing and working with our principals to better meet our EL learners' needs in accessing and being successful in the content, grade level curriculum. For example, with our Title III monitoring tool, we've already started to schedule individual site visits where we're going to go meet with our principals, introduce the self-assessment tool so that they could do that for themselves and check their school plan and see what is their EL focus, and then see how we could support them. But we're trying to direct them in the thinking of, okay, now is what you're doing with the EL pull-out time, how are you taking that back to your PLCs and integrating it into your grade level curriculum?
Yep.
And so going on that audit really gets you thinking in that idea. So I encourage that. And it's not an audit, it's a
visit.
It's a visit. So I apologize for using the old term. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, remember, we're all new here. No, it's not an audit.
My name is Amy Campbell, and I'm the principal at Ogden Preparatory Academy and the new lead for a consortium in the north of 3 charter schools.
Now, we have to give this woman like a huge round of applause.
Yeah, it was a brutal.
If you have no idea about how consortiums work and how funding in relationship to the federal obligations for a limit of $10,000, which is like $10,000. It can't be $9,990.
I qualified for $9,944, but I didn't get it.
Yeah.
So I had to go recruit and educate. That was entertaining. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, we will. So she's going to be our go-to person for how you actually explain the obligations in relationship to funding if you have a district or you're in a consortium, because she knows.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So how do you get on an audit team? Can we put that on the list? Should I write it on my card?
Yeah.
The visitation group.
Is the visitation group. That sounds a little creepy, visitation group. I don't know. There's actually the explanation of the visits in one of your packet documents, and then it schedules it. And then all you have to do is you can even mark it on here and let me know at the end of the meeting if you want to be on one of the teams. Okay. Because it does make a significant difference if you actually are in the experience, and that's why we have peer reviewers come with us. Because the goal is to provide. Well, first of all, it's a really learning experience for the peer reviewers who are going to, other districts and then using a rubric in relationship to observing what's happening in classrooms. Yeah, they end up being a really powerful representation of becoming more thoughtful and reflective in relationship to their own work. So it does make a big difference. And the way the self-assessment tool is organized, it's based on obviously the statute based on civil rights law, state law, board rule. And so there's actually no excuse for saying, I didn't know. And the reason I'm saying that is it's the state agency's responsibility to support the knowledge and learning and growth and development of the local education agencies. That's, it's like our responsibility. If people don't know, it's our problem, right? How are we working with people to make sure they're knowledgeable? Right, so the whole thing that Ogden is doing with taking the tool to the principals so they have knowledge, is really important. You can't be negative with principals if they have no idea. You can develop their talent and their capacity for making good decisions if they understand what the expectations are and if you're clear about that. That's all. And just a way to help each other.
Annalise Ruiz, Title III Director for Alpine School District.
Do you want to say something about what you learned on your visit or anything that you want to say about it?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to be a peer reviewer for Salt Lake City School District, Washington Elementary, and I echo what everybody else has said so far because it was really a learning experience for me and going in with that lens of equity and how to make content comprehensible to English learners in the various grade levels and classrooms that we do throughout the day will be very informative for me to then take it back to my district and organize it and coordinate to the point where everyone is informed and know exactly what we're looking for.
Thank you.
So I encourage everyone to volunteer and participate. It's time well spent.
Yeah, and you get to be with me, so
Yes, which is all the fun.
Okay, Rhonda.
I'm Rhonda Bickmore. I'm the Cultural Linguistic Diversity Teacher Specialist. If any of you know Sarah Roberts, that's why my title is this long. And I'm with Ogden School District.
Great.
All right, good morning. I'm Megan Lopez, and I am the WIDA and Secondary Language Arts Assessment Specialist here at the state.
Okay, so we're going to actually adjust this a little bit. We're going to have Megan go first. Oh, and the person in the back, sorry about that. So, can't we make a place for her at the table? She's going to, if you come up here, because she's not going to be here. She's here now, but she's going to do this magic disappearing act, and then we won't see her anymore.
It's nice and warm for you. And then I think we have
Is there someone else back there?
I can relate.
Yep. Oh, sorry.
I'm Jennifer Burris-Sanchez. I'm Jennifer Burris.
It's on. You can see the red.
Jennifer Burris-Sanchez from the Salt Lake Arts Academy here in Salt Lake.
Oh, great.
Down the road.
Michelle, you need to come up because she's leaving. So come up, and then we can pull another chair, and we can pull one up here. See, Michelle thinks she's going to get away with, not being up here. Not happening. Provo is the district I tend to. Even though I love all the districts, I end up bragging quite a bit about Provo, and she's done some amazing work. So, come up. Jordan and Granite. So Jordan and Granite are coming up. Provo is Michelle. Charlene Louie, and then Nancy. Charlene from Granite and Nancy from Jordan. Oh, Karen. Like, I didn't notice you. I couldn't read your back. So, okay, great. Yeah, move around. She's going to be leaving soon. Okay, so, thank you. What a flexible group. Yeah, you do rock. You realize, because of you all, you're the only reason I'm sticking around for a couple more years. If it weren't for you, I'd be in a hermitage somewhere with my dog, so on a mountaintop. Okay, come on up. Karen. There's a chair there. Okay, so Megan's going to start. Okay, Megan, take it away. Yeah. Here.
I'm going to
use that one.
Okay, so the online people can hear me. So, first, I just want to say it's I loved this introduction because I have emailed back and forth with many of you, and it's so fun to put faces to names. And thank you for constantly contacting us with questions, especially concerning WIDA. So
they're a courageous group. I mean,
Yes, and I can tell by the emails that your interest is in just advocating for our ELs, and your questions are just so insightful, and it always gives me, reason to pause and think about the work that we do. So I'm going to be referencing this sheet. It says USBE WIDA News.
It's in your packet.
And
USBE
the first
WIDA News.
thing, so you should see the new WIDA logo up at the top, right? So the first thing that we're going to be discussing
It looks like a smallpox shot. The WIDA logo. Sorry.
First I would like to say on behalf of Anne Michelle Neal, she apologizes. She is out of the state. She could not be here, but she wanted to very much say hello, and she's sorry that she's not here. Please contact either one of us. We both together are covering WIDA. So at the very bottom of this, actually, Item 5 is our contact information. So my role with WIDA is I'm more of the test administration specialist for WIDA. So anytime you have any questions regarding technology and just how do I use the website, how do I use AMS, how am I getting reports, any troubleshooting, please contact me. And then Anne Michelle deals more with the data gateway side of everything and just policy side when it comes to the testing of our ELs. So, but we can both field questions anytime. So please don't hesitate to contact us. So our first big item is that we are excited. WIDA access results are now on Data Gateway. Those went live this week, and so they are there. If you tried to access them last week, they were not there. So all you need to do is just go into your Data Gateway, and you're going to click on your Tools option once you log in, and then you will see the option for accessing reports. So the reports, we do just want you to be aware, they do look a little different this year.
So I put them in your packet, so it's really important that you look at this. She's going to explain the difference and why this is important.
Yep. So one of the big differences is that in order to make it ADA compliant, we needed to put it on 2 pages. We recommend when you're printing them, possibly save a tree, go double-sided when printing. And another big difference is that you're only going to see 2017 and 18. We went through a process of standard setting again, so we didn't feel like it was valid to compare after the different standard settings. So you're only going to see on that first chart 2017 and 18. On the back, however, at the bottom, no, I'm sorry. And now I have to find it because this is new, and we just barely started looking at it. You should be able to see. Oh, yep, there it is. The front page at the bottom, you should be able to see their 2016 scores still. But just keep in mind that was previous, so before the standard setting. So just be aware of that.
So here's the big issue. The big issue is if this report isn't being used and principals don't know about it and they're not trained to use it with their grade level teams or in PLCs, then this is a wasted resource. So you all have to figure out a strategy, and if you need a strategy, just call me anytime. I can come out to your district and we can talk about the implications in relationship to understanding receptive language and the difference between how, listening is actually connected to reading because of comprehension issues, and then, expressive in relationship to speaking and writing, and the increase in teaching academic conversations in the classrooms. Because if that's not happening, I'm just telling you, we're not going to get any progress at all. You just have teachers standing up talking at kids, or they're doing worksheets. This is not going to make a difference. There's actually, I won't mention which school it is. They download this and they use this for parent-teacher conferences, and they have the students set goals with their parents, and then the kids actually explain. So they have some control over their learning. That's the point of being a self-regulated learner. If they don't know this data, it's hard to be motivated. So think about this as a really important resource. If you don't have access, now all the teachers instantly have access because it's aligned to their rosters. But if you don't have access, you have to go to your assessment director and actually get access. Even before you log in, you go to the assessment director, you say, I want access to all the individual student WIDA reports. And the reason this is important is, and I'll tell you a little bit later about the amendment that we're proposing for the annual growth goals. It's going to be highly differentiated in relationship to the needs of individual students. So it's not like just this linear thing. Okay, so every year you're going to do this. No, it's based on your grade level, your proficiency level, interrupted formal education, all those kinds of things. And we're trying to do it so it's more personalized, individualized. So these are really important documents. That's my elevator pitch.
Oh, and I appreciate that pitch because I think the other why these reports are so important and so informative for teachers to adapt their instruction with is I think a lot of teachers only would look at their overall proficiency. Yeah. And we see that in the yellow. But how did that student get that 3? I can have multiple students with a 3, but that back chart where it truly shows me this student, they're really, truly, it's their listening, right? Mm-hmm. that we can work on. Yep. And we can see that this student has strength in writing, so we can take that and build off of that stronger foundation there, and then we know that I'm probably going to have to differentiate my instruction for this kiddo, and I could have a student with a 3, but these scores tell a totally different story, so we really want to get into the data. Yep. And so we're happy these are available. Please use them as much as you can.
Rhonda.
The data gateway drops you if you haven't been in for 6 months. So it's sometimes really hard for teachers who've been in maybe in December and then they come back to school in August and they can't get in again. So just that's something you have to really pay attention to.
My question is, since you also work with language arts, how are these reports also being shared with content specialists at the district level and curriculum directors, so then these resources widely shared and used among districts and content areas?
So teachers in all content, if they have an EL student in their classes, they have access to this. At the district level, again, just like Christelle said, all content are at the district level content specialists. They will need to contact their assessment director to make sure that they have this.
I guess my question is here at the state level. How is this shared in curriculum with curriculum directors and other content area specialist meetings when they come here? Is this a resource that is also shared with them?
Yes. We try to. It's hard to get on the agenda for every single meeting, but as soon as the reports come out, we message it out to curriculum directors, literacy specialists, and we always announce it to the assessment directors as well to message it out to their district people and partners.
So yeah, and just so you know, because of the feedback we get on ESSA, I now work closely with the teaching and learning staff because they're over the curriculum directors. So I've used this data with them. The other issue that I think is really important and strategic is that in the ESSA plan, we actually connected K-3 reading funding with work with English learners. So you can't actually say things like, oh, well, we have, they increased it by $40 million for the K-3 reading program, but there's nothing that really supports the way in which English learners and braided funding is supportive of the work that English learners have to do. So when people say, oh, you have Title III funds and it's supplemental funding, then you should say, okay, but what about the K-3 funding? You see what I'm saying? And in the ESSA plan, it just makes that case. And it makes the case for braided funding being used in relationship to the K-3 reading. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Okay.
I believe we have one more question.
Yeah.
It'd be good if you'd say your name and the district because, there are people who are
Lynette
online.
Johnson, San Juan. Two quick things. One is I did get dropped off the login over the summer and can't get in. And it says contact your LEA. I contacted our IT specialist, and he said he got dropped too, and he can't do anything about it. So
Okay,
I left a voicemail yesterday, but haven't heard anything from the state. Who should I be contacting?
So we have a new data reporting specialist, and she oversees Data Gateway. Her name is Lisa McLaughlin.
So could you tell Lisa that...
Yes, and if she's here, I can actually, when I run out of here, I can bring her. She was sick yesterday, so I'm not sure if she's here yet.
Because the other thing you could do is you could fill out one of these cards with your name and your district.
And I can bring them up to her.
Okay.
And if I can, I'll have her introduce herself so you guys will
And
know.
then the other thing is I'm aware of these, and we do a decent job of getting those out and that, but I'm not really sure about the district level ELL reports for planning. I can get in and do the little bubble thing and use a calculator and all that stuff, but where do I get more of a synthesized look at the district level for those planning documents?
With WIDA reports? Sorry, I've been turning it off, so
it's on.
interference. So those, so this is just student level, but to get your school level, district level, you're going to want to talk to most likely your assessment director, whoever is in charge of WIDA test administration, because they get all of those reports, and those reports are not as pretty as this. They just come in big CSV files.
Yeah, I've got access to that, but it's almost impossible to deal with. But
if you want, please, I can help you filter that stuff.
Okay.
Please contact myself and again, Lisa McLaughlin, so she's our data reporting specialist. We can help you sift through those huge spreadsheets so you can get what you need.
Okay, so let me say one other thing. I'm working with the Data and Statistics Department and the Assessment Department because the 5 ESSA indicators for reporting have to actually be on a dashboard. They just can't be individual reports that people in the LEAs are struggling to make sense of. So we're working on creating a dashboard with those 5 indicators, which would then include, based on your self-assessment tool, all the data that you need, from USBE being responsible for providing that in a way that you can deal with it. Where's Michelle? Yeah, so Michelle Eldridge brought this up, I think, 3 years ago, and we generated, and when we did the initial UCA, and we tried to focus on which English learners and at which proficiency level were making the annual growth goals before ESSA, we realized that the kind of data that's being used for planning doesn't really support what actually happens. And so now, because it's part of the state accountability and 9% of your grade is going to be determined by ELs, they're designing an actual dashboard for all those reports and indicators so that you'll have access to them.
Will that be done in time for us to use this
I have no idea, but as soon as I find out, I'll let you know. And
so
you don't
just do the best we can until then?
Well, one thing you could do is, because I know that the reports aren't available, all you say is USBE reports on your self-assessment tool. Because remember, November 1st, they're all due.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
No. Well, no, you can't. No, you can't really. You can't. Okay. So you actually can't do any growth goals, right? Because the requirement in ESSA is that the state develop the annual growth goals like the MAOs based on a long-term goal. So that's the responsibility of the Data and Accountability and Statistics Department. So you don't need to worry about that. I mean, eventually you will worry about it, but you don't have to worry about it now.
Did you say 9%?
9% of your grade. Now the
And
grades
it's not
are
on a sliding scale based on the number of students that you actually have. It's just a flat 9%.
Well, the reason is because the state actually, that's 9. Actually, the state has about 11% of ELs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it says, how will school performance be measured, and it's 9% of the related to the grade that you're going to get. You understand?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's state accountability is aligned with federal accountability. You're not going to get grades. You're not going to get grades this year because there's a moratorium based on issues related to science, right, and other issues. So this is good because that means we can work on this all this year, get ourselves organized, so that we're clearer about how we're going to use that data to really allocate resources. So I'm just going to be really clear. You can't keep allocating resources the way you've always allocated them if English learners aren't making progress. You can't have standard formulas. You have to actually look strategically at what the students need and the principals need in particular schools, because that's how they're going to be evaluated. The schools are going to be evaluated that way. And you don't want to be in a room where you have principals, left on their own. I mean, I'm just saying. You have to be really transparent and really clear with them and support them. Okay. Any other questions for Megan?
When they come up, just email us.
Yeah,
or call.
They're very good. If you're having really serious problems with access, you should put your name on here. And as Megan walks out, give it to her. Mm-hmm. She'll go up and solve the issue, and by 12:30 she'll have it fixed.
And I'll pass the buck to Lisa.
Okay, thanks, sweetheart. Let's give her a round. Are you finished?
No, Obo, sorry. Okay, I'm going to go quick.
I was about ready to kick you out.
WIDA materials ordering, there is a change, so if this applies to you, we have heard feedback from the field, and we hope that this streamlines the process for you. You don't have to do materials ordering this year.
Yay!
So we made a change. Your materials will be ordered based on your pre-ID file that is uploaded to the state and then to WIDA. So we will base all materials. All that means, though, is that you need to just do your due diligence beforehand and just make sure that those students that are EL are being identified in your SIS system as EL. The way that extra materials works, that's not changing. You will get a slight overage also sent just in case you need extra with that initial materials order. So it's just less work for you. So yay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. The next one is the e-learning pilot, and that is going to also be with this handout. And there are extras. I tried to print off a big stack back there. So if you want to take extras, and I am happy to email electronic copies of this as well. But we are really excited. We applied for a pilot to do e-learning, and we were one of 5 states in the country accepted to do this pilot program. And what this does is it creates the opportunity for every single educator in the state of Utah to participate in e-learning for ELs. So there are 4 Canvas modules available, and teachers will get relicensure credit for doing this. And there is also one webinar. Again, every educator and even aides, paras, they can also partake in this. And so our biggest concern is making sure that we are getting this message out to all the educators, that this is a free opportunity. And so WIDA has asked us to identify the district learning coordinators for all the different LEAs in the state to help us in identifying teachers that need access. The only way to get to these free learning opportunities is if you have a WIDA account. And once you do have a WIDA account, you just log into your secure portal and account, and then there's a little button that says e-learning, and that's where the teachers will access that. But we need help in messaging it and getting those teachers registered for those WIDA accounts so they have access to it. And Michelle and Christelle and I have been discussing this. Who would the best person be for that district learning coordinator to help us? And we were thinking that as ALS directors, you might be the best because you know the EL educators in your LEAs. So we thought you would probably be the best one to communicate this opportunity out, and also might be the best people to say, hey, let's get you accounts. And so we were wondering, as an action item, would you be willing to help us? Could we say to WIDA, you are going to be that? And it would take minimal work on your behalf, but we have directions that we can send to Christelle and she can send out to you on how to create accounts. You can just do a mass upload of your teachers, and we didn't want to do a mass upload of teachers and then just say, hey, why do I have this account? What is this about? We thought that it would be best if you would like to, but also we have seen some LEAs already decide to do PLCs around these opportunities and really use them as a mode of professional development, especially to better inform our instruction. Yes.
So can I second the motion and then we can vote on it or whatever? We just go like this. Okay.
Yeah, everyone's in favor?
Everyone's in favor.
I will say, okay, so, okay, there we go.
I have a logistical question. Do we know about how long those modules take? Teachers, what are they designed?
Each one is a little different. So some of them could take up to 14 hours. They would get 14 relicensure points in that case. But they are self-paced. They can do them when they feel, anytime. And it is open now. They just went live September 1st, but they are available all the way through the end of June. We have been in discussions with WIDA to extend that because we know that a lot of LEAs will want to do maybe some professional development around these e-learning opportunities in the summer as well, in gearing up for maybe next year. So you guys can, I think the webinar is maybe only 2 hours, so they really vary in length.
So is there a way to make that be the credits, not just relicensure? A lot of my teachers are pretty cranky, like
they want that lane change credit. That would require further discussion between
so I can work with
and myself.
If there are assignments and things
No, I can.
it's pretty easy.
I can work with you on it, so don't worry about it. So I'll work with you on it, and then the other thing is, I I think there should be, based on the modules, you should talk about the expectation for time, that it's self-directed, and then describe what the content is or something, because people can't make decisions if they don't know what it's about.
Right.
So if I work with you on that and we get it out and we organize it for credits, USBE credits, then it would be, we can do that really simple. Okay?
We'll get that in the works.
Okay, great.
Awesome. And then the last item on the agenda for me is WIDA. If you haven't seen it yet, they rolled out a new website. So we just wanted to make you aware. If you go to the old website, it will automatically redirect you, but we have put the new address on there. It is easier to navigate. And please remember that Utah does have a state-specific page there. So if you go to our state-specific page, you can get the ID and placement guidance, the just checklists for all the different tests, state-specific directions, and of course, all of our contact information and how to contact WIDA or DRC for questions, their help desks. When you log in, one tip that we have is just automatically log into your secure portal, and then you'll be able to have access to everything. They've put most information now behind the secure portal. There is an overview video, just 4 minutes. We've put that on here as well to help you kind of navigate the new website if you need help as well. But if you have any questions about where things are, just contact us and we can walk you through it as well. And that is it.
Okay, thanks. Give her a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Does anyone have cards for me that they would like me to take to our data reporting specialist?
Take advantage of her now before she leaves.
Would you if she's here, would you like me to send her down so she can introduce herself? Because she would be your all tests data reporting specialist.
Just send her down, but we don't really have time for anything long.
So I'm just wondering, with that report on that we get for all of our students that shows that they're making adequate progress, if that is available or not going to be available until after they norm science, or
are you talking
is
about
it with WIDA, right?
No, it's available.
Okay.
Oh, with WIDA?
Yeah.
This report?
Yeah, it's available.
Those just became available this week.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they are on the website, or are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Data Gateway.
Yeah, they're in the Data Gateway.
They're in the Data Gateway, not WIDA.
Not WIDA.
You aren't talking about WIDA, though, are you?
No, I'm sorry. I was talking in terms of WIDA, but when I go into WIDA on my tools, all I can get are all the individual student reports. I'm looking for that collective report that we've used.
Like a CVS file? Like a data sheet?
And it gives us, some,
You
okay.
access that through AMS, though.
Through AMS? Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just make one clarifying comment, and then we're going to go. We're going to do something different.
Letting me interrupt at the beginning.
No, thank you. So just so you understand that in the ESSA plan, every state determined the end size for accountability. Utah, for as long as I know, related to accountability, the end size, you're accountable for 10 students. If you have 10 ELs, you're accountable for them. So the end size is 10. There are some interesting states, because of the low end size of some schools, they actually adjusted it so that it had to be the end size of 1, which means if you have 1 EL, you're accountable for that EL. It doesn't have anything to do with, number. There are other states, I won't mention any names, that sometimes try to beat the system, and their end size is 40. Utah doesn't do that because we have, obviously a sense of integrity and relationship to support for individual learners, which I think you should be proud of. I mean, that's a good thing, right? Yeah, and people fought for that when I think No Child Left Behind came out. Okay, so here, you have cards, and we're going to try something a little bit different. It's like any question you ever wanted to ask about special ed in relationship to support or directions or anything like that. We're going to give you time to think about them and write the questions down. And then we're going to give them to our special ed specialists, and they're going to sort through them a little bit, and we're going to see if there are trends. Now, the reason the cards are important is we're going to use that for working together with a document that says frequently asked questions. So your questions are important, and we want to make sure that you're very clear about the relationship between IDEA, special ed law, and civil rights law and ESSA, and about dual services. So, but before we're going to give you time to do that, about 4 or 5 minutes. We're going to collect them. But we did have new people coming in. So Wade came in. So Wade, you want to say your name and your district, and there are two other people who came in.
Sorry, I came in late. Wade Menlo with Nebo School District.
You don't have to be sorry that you came in late. You're here. We love that you're here. They're in the back, and then also the gentleman over there. Yeah. Freedom Prep, great. Thank you.
Mark Hansen with Davis District.
Okay, welcome. We're bragging about Davis before you came, just so you know. John was bragging to me about Davis, about your EL graduation rate, so, we're all excited.
Add something before we start.
Yeah, okay, so my friend Kim is going to add something.
I just wanted to add that if you have questions that are frequently asked of you in your LEA, please add those as well, because sometimes we think we've answered these questions and we've given enough guidance, and then we get them repeatedly. So there's no silly question. There's no judgment about any question. If it's a question you have, or if it's a question that is frequently asked of you, let's put it down so that we can make sure we include that in the frequently asked questions, because we're going to create this document and also link it with citations. All the federal citations that support it, and we want it to be very user-friendly for the field as a whole.
Yeah, so you're doing us a great favor. So write them down, and then, so at 10 o'clock we'll start. They'll give them a chance to sort, and it'll give you time to kind of get up and walk around, and then we'll start right away as soon as we get all the, and you don't have to write your name on it. This is like anonymous. You can write your name on it if you want to. It's not like, you can't. So.
Do you want questions separated, like one question per card so you can sort them into trends? Instead of putting everything on one card?
That's fine.
Yeah, that would be great.
So one question per card is great. And we have someone who's going to bail us out of many issues related to Data Gateway. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Lisa McLaughlin. I'm the new assessment and reporting specialist.
Hi, Lisa. We like that you're going to come and help us. Well, I think don't worry about it. We'll send it out when I send out other information, your information and Lisa's information, because there are lots of people that are listening online. So we'll take care of that.
Any questions, Data Gateway? She's your gal.
Okay, thank you. Great job.
Does anyone else have cards?
Any other cards? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
What's your name?
Kim. It's Kim Fratto.
T-T-O. F-R-A-T-T-O.
As soon as you finish your cards, you're going to hand them up to us, and then you're going to take about, a 5-minute break and then come back while they sort.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you brought the credit issue up, because there's no reason why you can't get credit. That doesn't make any sense.
And I look, there's a lot of assignments and things, and that's really all they have to do is have
That's right.
something
That's right.
recorded by
Yes,
the
don't worry
classroom.
about it. We'll get it taken care of.
And I think it's been pretty easy for us once we built that.
Yeah.
To get that overview of it. So
Okay.
I think
Well,
my teachers we give them relicensure for everything that they do, and they're not all that invested in it.
Yeah. Well, this one will be more beneficial, and you won't have to do anything because we'll have it all set up for you. You don't
Nice.
have to do anything.
Nice.
So
the beauty of that too is we're doing so much of our staff development this year. We're doing blended learning where teachers have choices.
Yeah.
And I
Good.
do have a lot that are really liking doing the Canvas modules versus the other.
Good.
So I don't want to be obtuse, and I rely on Chris a lot. But if I want to get to that report for just Murray District, it shows the proficiency.
I would not know how to do it. You'd have to ask the assessment people. That's
So you
I
have
don't.
good people working for me too.
Well, I don't do the assessment piece because it's their department. Here's some more. So this is like everything anyone ever asked you and you ever wanted to know. You know, it's kind of the.
That's awesome. Thank you. I was thinking when she was talking about logistics, what the possibility will be to create a generic login for our teachers. So we're not constantly creating accounts, but then I wonder if there's
I don't
a way
know.
to link it individually to what they're doing.
You'd
Does that
have
make
to
sense?
ask them.
Yeah.
So you should.
Okay,
Are
I'll
you
bring
talking
that up.
So you're talking about the actual PD?
The e-learning.
You should write it down.
Okay.
And then I'll take it to her.
Okay, perfect.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, it's good to see you.
Your name was nowhere on the website. Oh, I changed it yesterday.
Thanks again for coming by. I'm just talking to Nancy. Next Friday, is that a good time for us to get together?
I see. I think so. I think that will work just great. Oh, that's not it. I know I was looking at it last night and I'm like, oh, I haven't even updated this. Plus I'm still hiring, in the process of hiring. Let's see, next Friday is the... Yeah, that works great. That works great.
Can you come down or should we go to Georgia?
No, I'll go wherever. Okay, yeah. Do you want me to come to you? Yeah.
No, there's no judgment about our No, there's no, that's why we say get in here because, yeah, there's no judgment for the questions. We want those questions.
And if that makes sense.
Yeah, in the basement, there's a soda machine. I think they're $1.50.
This one's for Christelle.
Oh,
To take to.
Up there? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
When did you go to Alpine?
July 1st.
Oh.
Yes, very close.
Yes. Fun. Yeah. Do you live that way?
Yeah, I live in Saratoga.
Oh, so.
Yeah, so it's a lot closer. And when did you move to special ed?
Last December.
Okay, okay. Okay, so I've not been hiding.
I was texting Beth this morning and said, I must have didn't see it.
We could talk, yeah. And that's the same question I wrote for them, too.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it is. Having to deal out there. Which direction to go? Yeah. It is. Oh, nice. Oh, nice.
You got it. You're stopped
I would have enjoyed the pressure. Right. You know, I'm so happy to see you here.
Oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, honestly. I must have known that, and I'm worried about those other people because just an explanation to them. And
you know what? I'm going to come help. I'm going to come help. Don't worry about it.
Okay. One of them, I've spent an hour just like, this is what it is, and then he's still.
Which one was it? Greenwood?
Fred Donaldson.
Is he Greenwood or is he?
No, Jessie was very
Jessie was
open,
cool.
but she's like, she's but no, at Da Vinci.
Yeah, I know them. That's kind of weird.
It's interesting to me, and this thing right here where it said if you have 10, you got to and he only had 6,000 coming in, but no, his 3,000, 3,500. And I had 2 conversations with him, and he just was like, so then it leads me to this place of are you doing or whatever? Are you watching your kids when they come in? And that's not my call to make, but I've got to educate them.
No, I agree. But you know what? I'll come out and we'll work as a consortium.
Okay, so I just sent it to my ALS director, my person who just said we need to sit down and get this in place for our people, and then I'm going to send an email. I am going to send an email to just say, hey man, make sure that you're coded correctly and that their email codes are correct before they upload on the Well, see what we do.
And you know, it depends on the day. I was like the last person to find out about what happened to Ogden. Did you know that?
No, us in
yeah, last year.
No, it just was so
because the decision, it wasn't even I didn't even know until after. I guess it was you or somebody emailed me, and I'm thinking, but I went to people and said, like, what's going on?
It was crazy because we had plotted for 13,000.
I know.
So that was like, we didn't know we had to do a consortium. Because we were in a consortium.
I know.
We're just going
Yeah.
We're right on that line.
You know what's better? I think it's better to just to do it because, you know,
Sundays are
the issues related to enrollment, because the preliminaries are always done, you know, at the end of the year, and then when the October 1 comes out, then they do the final ones. So that ends up being...
And our numbers are like, they're going to change the deal. There's so much saturation in schools. And there's now, especially in the there's going to be they're opening two Spanish classes in a few places. And now there's a contingency Esperanto So there's this like, there's a pool, and then our enrollment is already being judged on these like there's a school within
I know, so yes, I know about the issues we face tomorrow.
I know you, and I can't figure out from where. Are you Canyons? Did you interview me? Like 17 times, yeah. I'm still at Hopeful. Yeah. I've been there for, this is my 6th year. I know. It's kind of a bummer. I interviewed with them also. I don't even know how many times, honestly. I think like 6. I look really good on paper, and then I don't know what I'm doing in the interview. Because and I also think that it's a history thing. Like, I don't think that they know me because I haven't been in the district now. So I have a lot of experience, and I have experience in the district, but I'm also coming from a charter now, which I would say is a huge experience in like real-time district experience, but it's not at the same level, the same size, the same number of people, which I did in the desert, but I did in Arizona, but that's hard because when they're, I don't know, in Jordan district I interviewed there a few times, but the moving of people with, because you're on your own, I totally get that. But how to break in, I don't know. Like, if you go all the way back to assistant principal and work your way through that.
I think it's really hard to apply when you have some administrative without understanding policies
inside the district.
So it might be hard to be like, in our district, honestly, the way to bus is through the uniform process, so that you understand that you're serving the evidence-based practices we do, and understand how we organize the LPs.
I have an email.
I know first names, but not last names.
The way to is to be an achievement.
You know what, I looked at
It's actually my favorite job in the world because I did that.
And then they also have external achievement plans that actually go into support, like for that are on top of certain
Yeah. I think the job I interviewed was with 26 schools or 20, that's too. I have not had one.
Yeah, so it was really,
So, and how do those don't come up periodically, they usually come up when somebody moves up.
Yeah, in our district,
so he was thinking, like, no, it doesn't mean that
but we also
you know, they interview them, I guess.
She's very, I think they can stack up like, there's 1 or 2 at every school. They shifted so they all are addicts for those.
And it's through instructional service. Is it just going to show up on your, is it going to show up in the administrative, or no, it's going to be teaching? Got it.
It's interesting because administrative services candidates are pretty tough. We get lectures on these 3 credits, and we have 2 and that was
right. And so,
but we do hire outside the district. It's every year. It's good. Just because they had that.
Anyway,
in a huge district.
But it is hard.
and email contact list. And then also working on a grant meeting. Oh, really? Video get into the district for 100 teachers.
Yeah, that's kind of been the goal. I moved for my kids, and I just took whatever job I could get in Utah, and so I've been in Ogden, and I've learned a ton, but I'm not built for a charter experience. I have some philosophical things about the system that is non-supportive for an administrator. It's because you do the job of so many. I'm the ALS, the principal, the active transfer feeding instructor. I can't hang in for the next 15 years. The system of interview is so difficult to.
I don't know what they're doing.
So the first time I interviewed with them, which was 6 years ago when I first got here, they had me run a faculty meeting, and it was staff from the district in a faculty meeting with scripts. And they were reading the scripts, and I don't know how you were being rated on how you were managing this crowd. It was a pretty rowdy group and pretty aggressive, and it was interesting. It was very interesting. And again, when you come from outside, and I totally get this, you didn't have, like, I don't know what the policy is, I don't know what the background is. The conversation was all about my 9th grader is being moved to the high school, and I don't want him to date seniors, so what are you going to do about that? And I know, like me, philosophically, from my background and from my experience, that's out of my control. Right?
Are they meeting saying that?
Like a pseudo faculty meeting.
I never really found it interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And then you go into a room where you do your personality testing. You do the Gallup. Yeah, it's a Gallup personality test, and they do a letter. You do a letter like Grants or like Canyons, and then you don't ever have any interview with anybody.
Are you ready?
So you don't ever. No one ever, like, with a panel of people. That's what I appreciated about Canyons a ton, is that, like, you actually get to read if that's where you want to be. Like, if those are people you want to work with, and if your person.
What do they mean they're grandfathered in? You can't be grandfathered into an ESL endorsement. Okay, so let's.
This year, like last spring, I interviewed at Granite, and they did a.
Okay, so we're going to come back together.
Who are also actors from the district, and you have to manage a principal-parent conversation, and mine was...
this is just too much fun.
Class. They hadn't talked to the teacher, they hadn't had any conversation with anybody.
Okay, so I'm going to...
Servers in the room that are marking you, and they've been told that Grandpa High get them really anxiety.
So I'm going to start with the first question. Okay, so here's a question. It says, if SPED teachers were grandfathered in to not having an ESL endorsement, then what happens? I don't even know what that means. Okay, so just to be clear, there is no grandfathering. Maybe grandmothering, but but not grandfathering. Okay, so it's pretty clear from ESSA, federal law, state law, board rule, that you have to have qualified teachers to teach English learners. Period. The state has developed with universities the ESL endorsement. Now, the ESL endorsement is based on the TESOL standards for teacher preparation for K-12 for teachers teaching English learners. Okay? It's the law. You can't pawn kids off to paraprofessionals. Okay, so there's no, like, grandfathering. We have several options that we got permission to do. One is a competency-based ESL endorsement, we have lots of districts like Davis who have their own program, and on the application you'll see like all the districts that have their program. They've taken on the responsibility. They just send us a list with all the teachers and their cactus IDs, and then they get the ESL endorsement, because obviously we're all interested in providing the best instruction for English learners no matter what level they are. Besides, it's actually written into civil rights law besides that. Okay, and I know we're all committed to that, right? So we trust districts to do that kind of professional development and the relationships they have with the universities. The application has all the universities that are approved and all the coursework that they do, right? Last year, we got permission to do a trial, a pilot of competency-based, where you use the standards, it's embedded in your actual practice, and you identify through an electronic portfolio with the support of the district competency-based, based on the rubric that is used in the TESOL standards, right? And you set goals, and then you gather evidence, and then your portfolio is presented and scored. And you can get an ESL endorsement that way. Teachers that I work with at CASH, where are you, CASH? They're doing some really, really, really interesting and innovative work, because the teachers in the ESL advanced class at the University of Utah that I actually support and teach, the kind of work that they're doing as teams and then as pairs or however they're doing it is embedded, right? So it's actually embedded with the English learners that they have in their classroom. It's not theoretical, it's not abstract. It has nothing to do with other than who the English learners are and how they're making progress, and how the teachers are actually setting goals in relationship to those individual learners. Okay, so that's competency-based. Then you have all the other universities that provide the support and online courses. You have all kinds of opportunities to become qualified to have an ESL endorsement, and there's no grandfathering. Okay, yes.
So in our districts, they're saying that the endorsed has to be just in the ELD, but we have teachers that are teaching EL learners in the content areas that aren't endorsed.
Well, the underlying assumption is based on this idea, frankly. My viewpoint is that everybody should be endorsed. And the reason I'm saying that, but it has to be an endorsement that matters to how they teach. It can't be some weird theoretical thing that has no connection to, because there are a lot of teachers who are ESL endorsed and they haven't changed their instruction at all.
But I want the grandfather term, because it is thrown around a lot.
There's no such thing as grandfathering.
So I think we need support that our, the leaders, I'll take that back, that term is thrown around, but they use it all the time in my district, and they say that, well, they can't teach ELD, so they're not doing English language development, but they still have EL students in their content areas, for the rest of the day. So I'm wondering how...
Okay, so, yeah, so two different things. And so let me just say that the Department of Education, not to mention OCR, is very clear about ensuring that every English learner has equitable access to grade level content in the content areas. So how are you all going to make sure that happens, right? Well, one way, from what I understand, is that there are some districts, based on whatever, they have an ESL endorsement requirement. And every single teacher, doesn't matter what you teach, you need the ESL endorsement. So the underlying assumption is that making content comprehensible to English learners just gives them a future. I'm just saying, they do not have a future at all in post-secondary education unless they have access to academic content. That's the other issue. And not to mention, because it's now part of the school grade, when your English learners aren't meeting those academic goals. So you...
I completely agree with you.
So then what do you need? Do you want me to write like a, I don't know, want me to give civil rights law and say this is what is required? Because it's in the self-assessment tool that you're supposed to fill out.
And we did, yeah, I know.
Lynette.
In our district, we had quite a bit of unfortunate experience with the OCR and Department of Justice years ago. And the legal documents that we drew up and agreements we drew up with them said that our elementary teachers, our SPED teachers, our secondary language arts teachers would be ESL endorsed. Our secondary content teachers would have PSYOP training, but they did not require an ESL endorsement for the secondary content teachers as long as they had PSYOP training.
And we have that in place, but we do have all these grandfathered in. So I guess I just need to take that term back and say that's not.
Okay, just say there's no such thing as grandfathered. All right? Are we all clear? Wade, did you have a question? And Michelle?
No, just comment, but it was the same as hers. I think the legal requirements are that in order to get English language development, they do have to be ESL endorsed. But your content teachers, I mean, we have a lot of content teachers that are endorsed, but legally I don't think they have to be. Is that correct?
No, all you have to do is read the board rule. The board rule says that every teacher has to be qualified. Civil rights law says that teachers of English learners, right, should know how to teach English learners. That's why do you think the disaggregated group of English learners has the highest dropout rate in the state, has the lowest SAGE scores? Why do you think?
Because nobody's getting to them.
Now, I'm just saying, when you fill out your self-assessment tool, and it says, how many endorsed teachers do you have? It doesn't say ELD teachers. So this is something to work toward. And when we come and visit you and we see, so the Department of Ed said it was our responsibility to go to content classes, to see if English learners had access to grade level content. They didn't say go to ELD classes. They didn't say that, even though we did go to some. The level of, I'm just going to say in general, and I'm being honest with you. I don't, this is nothing about being political or being, I'm just a pretty clear person and really simple. If you go into an ELD class and it's not aligned to anything that's happening in their content classes and there's no rigor and no expectations for any kind of academic success, why do you think we're in kind of the mess we're in? All you have to do is look at the data. We score lower on content than special ed. How can that be possible? I don't know. So I'm just saying you have to use, this is not an issue of is it legal, is it not legal? You have to have some kind of like moral compass in relationship to every single student, right? And then you have to be really clear with teachers. And you have to observe them. You have to help principals. There are principals who have English learners in their schools and they don't even know what ESL is or ELD. Now, how can that be possible? I'm just saying, how can it be possible? Like, I'm not making this up. Okay, so I'm being straight with you. And you just have to go back to your districts and say, no. Look at the self-assessment tool. Look at the regulations from OCR. In OCR, it's really clear, besides the dual services that we're going to get to. If you have English learners or redesignated English learners who are not in early college coursework, you should be asking yourself the question, why is it that we don't have kids, redesignated in 4th and 5th grade and then have no access to early college coursework, whether it's honors or concurrent or AP or IB or, Why? I mean, I can give you really great examples of places where that doesn't happen. Hillcrest, biology. We want to see great team teaching in an academic environment for refugee and EL kids. Go to Hillcrest. Their 9th grade team teaching. Go to West High in their advanced computer science class. AP computer science class. Go to Park City in their content link classes that are now being adopted at Timpview High School. I mean, there are places that do this. We don't have to go to Finland. There's great instruction happening here.
We'll take a field trip.
Okay, so the grandfathering, we're putting that to rest. And, you know, if you have a problem, you can always call on me to come and talk to your folks. I'd be happy to do that. Okay.
Okay, great. So really a lot of great questions, so thank you. We have a lot of themes that are presenting, so we're not going to answer every question because that would take too long, but we're just going to pull out some that are pretty common, and then we'll compile all these, including the grandfathering one, onto a frequently asked questions and give you all that information and the federal citations to why or why not something can or cannot happen.
And this always is good when you have the actual legal citations, because people will tend to argue, and they'll say, well, I don't agree with that, and that's not my opinion. Okay, so we're not dealing with opinions here. It's actually the law.
So a common theme that came on these cards was questions regarding students with severe disabilities or significant cognitive disabilities. So there are a lot of questions. Some are very similar. I'm not going to answer all of them, as I said, but here's one. Describe the expectations for an EL with severe disabilities to progress. How does this affect school accountability? Okay, so many of you may have heard, if you follow anything with special education, that we had a recent Supreme Court ruling in the 10th Circuit. It was the Andrew F. case, and the Andrew F. case didn't redefine it. It clarified the Raleigh standard, and the Raleigh standard was students needed to make de minimis progress or benefit, and so the clarification was that a student needs, through the Andrew F. case, is now a student needs to make reasonable progress, and that is reasonable progress in light of the student's disability. Okay, so IEP teams are teams that look at what that reasonable progress should be. On an IEP team, if you have a student that is an English learner, you should have an English language development specialist on that team. That should be part of the team.
Okay, so did you hear that? So I'm just going to say one thing because I've heard this like 50 million times. You can't have special ed people telling EL people that the IEP has a literacy goal and that's taking care of EL. No. Absolutely not. The EL person has to inform based on the proficiency of the student related to language development and their individual WIDA scores. Okay, this whole thing about, oh, we have a literacy goal, we don't need the EL person.
So the next question speaks to that. Why do we have to give dual services? Okay, so we kind of answered that. And this is frequently asked from the field. This is a question that someone indicated is frequently asked from the field. And I believe that because I am frequently asked this question at the state as well. One does not override the other. They are separate services and they are entitlement services. That means if a student qualifies for both services, they must receive both services. Okay? So, and we'll really clarify that. But that's a very common one. So, another one, is there a waiting time to refer an EL student for special education services? And the answer to that is no. And I'm going to say no with a caution. We want to make sure that we don't refer students to special education because they're having problems with language. Now, one of the things that I do here at the state, the disability category that I oversee is specific learning disability, which is the largest disability category in the nation and is the largest disability category in the state. It's it's a tricky area because students that have a profile of LD, learning disability, or SLD, specific learning disability, they present very similar to students with EL profiles. Okay, they have difficulty with comprehension. They have both listening, verbal, and reading comprehension. That's common for an LD student. Is common for an EL student. They have difficulty following directions. They make errors in syntax and grammar. Very commonly. They have difficulty with task completion. They may develop poor self-esteem, and their attention is not great. So that is a profile of both an LD student and an EL student. So you have to really dig into your data and say, okay, let's look at this. They're having difficulty with reading comprehension and spelling, but are they making like irregular errors in their patterns? Can they not blend some of the sounds over and over again? With targeted intervention, are they not able to make progress? So we will give you some examples in some of these documents that we create on what would present for a typical LD student and an EL student, and what might present for a student that is EL with a learning disability.
Can you translate that also down to the preschool level, so through Child Find, because sometimes they come to preschool already with an IEP, and I'm not sure what assessments are used to differentiate that. And at that point, we're like, why do we have this many preschoolers that already have an IEP, and how did that take place, or what assessments were even given at that point?
Yeah, that's great. We'll do that. I think that's really an important thing. How many of you speak another 2 languages or more than one language? How many of you have ever taken a language class to learn a language? And are you fluent after you've taken the language class? I'm just wondering. My future daughter-in-law is from Brazil, and she speaks Portuguese. So I am now in Portuguese classes because my grandchildren will speak Portuguese. And I'm taking them with my son. And I have to say, he called me and says, do you want to take these classes with me? And I'm like, yeah, this would be great. And he goes, good mother-son project. And I'll tell you, I thought the mother-son activity of learning to golf was hard. It has nothing on this. It is a struggle. So really, we really have to look at and make sure it's not a language issue, because if I were being assessed in another language, I would clearly come up with a lot of difficulties.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So I've been asked several times already from different teams that say a student is struggling, that is a special ed student, and they have tested proficiency on the access, and so their question is, should we rescreen them? And I ask, well, are there language-specific acquisition, and the team is really not able to. So I don't know how to direct them other than to look closely, like you said, but do you have any?
You're saying they've tested out if they've tested out, but they're a student with a learning disability, then I wouldn't say that it would be best practice to rescreen them, because it may not be that language, it may be the disability if they've tested out. Yeah, if they tested out.
Adamant that.
Yeah, and one of the things to look at too is, when they reevaluate them, not screen them for WIDA, but look at testing in another language, because a student would not present with a disability in one language and not the other. Yeah, or even in their first language. Their first language would be where I would go to after the nonverbal, before I would rescreen them to put them through WIDA. All right, so just to follow up on this question, no, but with caution, because with Child Find, under Child Find, if you suspect disability, then that invokes Child Find and you have to test, but you shouldn't suspect disability before you've ruled out if it's a language issue, so really look for that.
I'm sorry, one more question. We have a nonverbal little one,
Mm-hmm.
and that has a language, question. Crystal, I'm not sure how to test them if they're nonverbal for EL.
Through the WIDA, or okay, if they have a significant cognitive disability, there is also a alternate test through WIDA that you could do. There's an alternate assessment. WIDA offers an alternate assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities. It's not a screener. It's not a screener.
So I just don't know how to get at that.
Okay, well.
But if they're nonverbal, you can do the other domains.
Yes,
to see where they land. because they're just not speaking, so you don't have to do the speaking part of it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's probably so you can at least take a stab at it to see is this where the student lands, because they have to do reading, writing, listening. I mean, I guess the speaking, but at least you can have some kind of data on the screener of where they land.
Will it generate a score, though? I know it won't generate a composite without speaking, but will it generate a score at all? From what I've seen, the report just shows that it's an incomplete report.
Right, but I mean, but you will see where the student is at academically, is what I'm saying.
So I'm going to say the best thing to do is to talk to the assessment department upstairs, because they're really the experts in relationship to WIDA. So we're going to do that.
And Michelle Neal is really great with these questions, and you can do the different composites in both assessments, the alternate as well as the regular WIDA. Okay, so this question, often this question comes in from sites, and I hear this too. There's no room in the child's schedule for ELD and special education services because they need to get credits that are required for graduation, and so can we just write the ELD services on the IEP plan? So this depends type of question. If it's written into the IEP plan and it's addressed not just as a language goal or a writing goal, if it's a specific English language development service that's written into the plan, it has to be able to be delivered by sort of like a qualified staff, right? So best practice would be to write a English language development plan and attach it to the IEP, and to have the person that is over that, they should be in attendance at the IEP team meeting, and they should talk with the IEP team on how they can embed that instruction through the instruction in special education. And again, the reason and why this is so important, again, because remember, there are two separate entitlement services. ELD services are Tier 1 services. This is a very important distinction that teams really struggle with. Special education services.
Sorry.
They are Tier 1 services, right? Because a student cannot have equitable access to their education if they do not have these supports. It's Tier 1. It's not an intervention, all right? Special education is specially designed instruction that's in addition to, not in place of core. So ELD, Tier 1, core services, special education in addition to. And special education is SDI, specially designed instruction, to address the unique needs of the student that are presented in light of their disability. Okay? So, very important distinction. Okay. And I just answered that one, same kind of question. Okay, how do you handle a situation where an IEP team determines that the student does not need ESL services? And I think we've talked about that. It's an entitlement. The IEP team doesn't get to say, our process overrides this process. It cannot happen, okay? And then Jennifer's going to...
Okay, so we've had this question, and people from the ALS department or ESL will say to me, well, the special ed department in our district is adamant. Okay, so it doesn't matter if they're adamant, right? It's against the law. It's an entitlement, right? So you all have to be, like, really clear. Okay. It's not one over the other.
That's right. So I'm going to go over a few more, and I just want to reiterate, we know that we're not going to answer every question today, but those we don't, we will put in that document for you. So this question, and we've kind of talked about this, is when we have a student who's in a self-contained, whose teacher's not endorsed, we comment in the IEP how the teacher's addressing the language, and attach the ILDP, etc. So again, kind of what Kim said is, if you don't have an ESL endorsed teacher there, an ESL endorsed teacher should be consulting frequently with that special education teacher to make sure that the English, the EL, the ESL, the English language acquisition goals are being met, as well as their needs in special education. Okay. And this one's just how do we ensure that ELL needs are being addressed in special ed IEPs? Then there's usually nobody there with that knowledge. It's the IEP team should officially invite those through those notice of meetings. They should invite that person to the IEP meeting so that they can speak with the knowledge, their ELL knowledge when addressing those issues in that meeting. Had a question, what's the difference between an IEP and a 504? An IEP is an entitled service that we provide specially designed instructions so students can access the free appropriate public education. Section 504 is a anti-discrimination law along with Title II that also protects kids with disabilities that may need accommodations to access. It can be if they're not eligible under any of the 13 categories in special ed, but they need transportation, they need counseling, they need any of the OT, PT any related services, that can be served under a 504 plan. The 504 also can address medical issues, and it's mainly accommodations that levels the playing field. That's the important part of 504. It levels the playing field for students to access their education, students with disabilities. And so that's an important piece of that. They both have child find and FAPE requirements. The student you have to do child find for 504 as well as IEPs, and they have to have free appropriate public education or FAPE under 504. And they both, if there's behavior issues where there's suspension, they both have the right to a manifestation determination. So there are some differences. Section 504 is an anti-discrimination law. So then the next one is, do ELLs qualify for a 504 plan based on student language needs only? No. That's their EL entitlement services, and it's not a 504 accommodation. It is an entitlement. So that's where they receive the services. However, if they needed any of those related services or any of those other things I just described, medical accommodations for diabetes or asthma or any of those things, then they definitely could have a 504 under those.
I just wanted to add one thing about the 504 because Jennifer and I get this question frequently about 504 and some disability categories under the IDEA. You do not have to have a medical diagnosis to receive either one of those services. And I think that that's important because especially for our parents who are not fluent in English and teens, there's a lot of teens out there that think that they have to have that medical diagnosis to receive certain services. And there's not a disability category under IDEA, even other health impaired, or under 504 that require that. So I think that's just important that everybody have an understanding of that piece. We get that a lot.
Yeah, some of them, they require a medical history, but way different than a diagnosis for 3 of the categories, and 504 it's helpful for. So this is a scenario. Child arrives from Mexico in 9th grade, no records, Spanish speaking only. Where do we start in the child find process? You would not start in the child find process. Where you start is in the EL process and the WIDA testing. And WIDA, this particular WIDA does come in Spanish, so you could start with that, have them take the English as well, so it gives you a baseline of where they are, because they may have some English skills that they're not sharing, because it's just like, you guys know this better than anybody, that at first we observe and we learn a lot of vocabulary before we start using it. So I always taught my teachers, think of it from a toddler perspective. They know a lot more than they can verbally speak. So just start there with that WIDA. Then if you have concerns after they take the WIDA in Spanish and you can see some issues there, that would be a child find issue, but not before that. Is there anything else that...
So we probably, what I'm thinking is, we'll actually work on the documents and the frequently asked questions, and then we'll have them come back to our next meeting, right? And we'll review all of this, and then I think one thing that we could do is you would generate cases, Do you know what I mean? Examples of cases. And then we could address them, because there's a wide range. It was just the other day, someone said to me, well, they're newcomers and we're not going to screen them because they don't know any English. Okay, what are you talking about? And I can understand things are confusing, but the role of the state agency is actually to clear up things and help you, right, before anybody gets in trouble or is reported. I mean, that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing. So what I'm thinking is, we'll work on these questions frequently asked. We'll try to develop cases for you, and then we'll come back to the in the next meeting, and then we'll really work on it together so that we'll have something substantial. Because these questions are not infrequent. They just like keep coming up. Okay. So I just want to thank my colleagues.
Ciao. I learned that.
So we're going to, we have Darren Nielsen, who's the Assistant Superintendent over assessment, which I know you're thrilled to welcome him. He has great skills in relationship to working with the state board and being very, generous and calm, and develops equanimity with the board, so he's a great guy. And so we're going to do a stand-up break, and then he's going to come up here. So about 5 minutes stand-up break, and then we'll come back to Darren. Thank you.
Well, and to demonstrate why we need to unlearn, I'm going to begin asking a series of questions. And so the first question is this. I want all of you to think.
And it's just 2018 one. Exactly. And so it just has the number of students who made it.
But then the question is, does the endorsement ensure that there's high quality instruction or something that will qualify? Right.
So you were in Canyon, so now you're in Salt Lake? Is that what it is? It's funny because you're Alpine? Oh, wow. Okay. Got it. One over the mountain.
Yes, I moved a year ago to Saratoga Springs, and I had been at Canyons for 9 years.
Wow.
And just the opportunity to be closer and doing the same job presented itself, so I just jumped at it.
Very different in character. I'm always curious about districts in Utah.
There's a lot of similarities. It is double the size, so regionally it's a very large district. I've had to separate it in 4 regions and attack it that
bigger
way.
than Canyons? Wow.
Twice the size.
It's not really.
We have 81 schools.
Gosh, and Canyons is what, 57?
45. Yeah. So in terms of, and we only have 800 more students than Canyons, but again, geographically, it's just
so
smaller
smaller classes and stuff. Oh, that's good.
I don't know that class size is smaller actually, because we have elementary schools that are almost 1,000.
Wow. That's craziness. Is there a high ELD percentage?
So our ELD percentage, let's see, 36. I want to say about 6%, 6-7%.
Yeah.
So yeah.
They just got the weedest stuff out.
I wonder what Ogden's percentage is.
Or she said it might be a moratorium.
And you're in Salt Lake?
I'm in Ogden, but I'm in a charter.
This report right here.
Trying to get to back. I moved from Arizona. So in Arizona I was in district for 16 years, and I've been here for 7. And in that charter, because it's really hard to get into a district unless you want to go back to teaching.
Depends, yeah.
And so it depends on the field or what you're in, right? So I think charters help increase like innovation, and I think there's some real high points, but it's not the job of an administrator. It's too much. It's like, because you do everything.
And that's what I was going to say, you're a Tracy Dream.
So you're a superintendent, and so you have to do everything that the superintendents do. It's at a smaller level because you don't have as many kids, but you still have to do that job, you know, so it's like, come on, get serious.
You wear so many hats.
Yeah, so I have this, and I have Title I.
Sorry, I come in late. I was like, well, I gotta get in there. No, she's in Park City.
Oh, Park City, that's what I was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Talk to her.
Because her little one and my little one play every now and again. So the last time we saw each other was at the fair.
Okay.
And then planning, setting up time. See her all the time.
She likes it there?
She loves it.
Yeah.
She was ready for it.
And what's her commute like? Does she live?
Well, she lives in, like,
oh, yeah.
And then that's for another day, but this one is like probably a no-brainer.
So
yes.
I'm
So
figuring
it's just
this
a
out.
hub of the...
yeah.
I just really want to do something here just for this.
Just come, you just invite me and we'll organize
Me
it.
to go over that. I was like, I live in West
Go to bed.
Jordan.
That's a lot good.
I'm already having issues commuting to Salt Lake. You want me to move to Park City? I mean, travel like
Unless you move there, right?
crazy. No.
Okay, so we're going to start.
Yeah.
I just learned about that.
So Darren is ready to start.
Because I asked about her.
I think we're all here. We'll be rounding some people up. Thanks, Darren, for coming.
Well, I am really happy to be here with you today. I thank Christelle for giving me time on your agenda. And I know, looking at it, you might think, okay, why are we going to spend time talking about assessments other than the WIDA in this group? But you're leaders in your district, and I've been trying to get in front of all of the leaders that I can across the state because we're having significant changes in our assessment system this year. You've probably heard some things about that, and I want to, in your position as leaders in your communities and schools, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to get information directly from me to be able to answer questions that you might have related to these assessment changes and so forth. So that's why I'm trying to get in front of every group of leaders that I can across the state. I want to start off, before we get into the details of the assessment changes, my goal is that when we're done, you'll have very specific answers about questions that you might have and be able to articulate the reasons for these changes that are going on. I don't expect you to fill the role of your assessment directors, although some of you might also be assessment directors at this table in your respective LEAs. Your assessment directors, though, will fill that role, but just to generally be able to speak about these changes and what they mean. I ran into this quote several months ago, and it really helped me. When I saw it, I thought, oh, that helps me understand some of the feelings I have at work. This concept of when we get up and go to work, we're either going to improve the world or we're going to enjoy the world. Talk about consumers and producers, right? And in education, we are always focused on improving the world. And it explains why sometimes our jobs feel less fun from day to day than other jobs. So in order to talk about assessment, though, we really need to have some context put in place. So I'm going to start out with a 2-minute video here to kind of get us going. I tested the audio before I came up here. And it worked. Let me try my backup plan. Somehow magically earlier when I plugged in this external speaker, it
There
caused
is a famous quote from Lao Tzu, an ancient Chinese philosopher, who said, "To attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, subtract things every day." And that's really what unlearning is all about. And to demonstrate why we need to unlearn, I'm going to begin asking a series of questions. And so the first question is this. I want all of you to think, what two colors are the yield sign? Take a minute. What two colors are the yield sign? And if you said yellow and black, congratulations, as most people over the age of 40 do, but that is the incorrect answer. The correct answer is red and white. And the yield sign has in fact been red and white since 1971. Now, I know that some of you are thinking, no way, that is not the case. Yes, it is. In fact, the first yield sign you see after you leave will be red and white. And I know that some of you are saying, well, in my rural area, they're still yellow and black. No, they're not. But it's this idea that, look, many of us learned yield signs were yellow and black way back when we were in driver's ed. We also learned things early in our career, early in our education, that were in fact true, but the world passes us by, and it changes. And so I have some bad news for you. Those of you who said the yield sign is yellow and black, this is in fact what your brain looks like today. Now, this is kind of a funny example, but I have another question for you, and I ask a lot of people this. I say, well, what causes ulcers? And a staggeringly high number of people say, well, ulcers are caused by stress and spicy food. That was conventional wisdom. We had heard that for years. But for 25 years, we have known that ulcers are caused by bacteria. But this isn't just average individuals who thought this. When Barry Marshall first discovered that bacteria were the cause of ulcers, he went before an august group of ulcer experts, and he was laughed off the stage. He came back the next year and was booed off the stage. Why? Because the ulcer experts knew how ulcers were caused. Well, they were wrong, and it took them a decade and a half to unlearn that idea. In fact, it is a fact within the healthcare community that from the time an idea has been identified as a best practice, it takes 17 years to work its way through the system and to become adopted as conventional wisdom. So in order to prosper in the future, we're going to have to unlearn.
I want you to think about that for a minute, this concept of needing to unlearn before we can learn new things. I've mentioned already that we're going to have significant changes in our assessment system, a system that's been in flux for quite a bit over the years, but it also has been stable. The SAGE assessment we've had in place for 5 years. So there'll be some unlearning that needs to occur. You think about that, though. Is that something you can relate to in your personal life, that we get these things in our minds and we believe it's the way it is, and then somebody just has to keep pounding on us until we finally get it? And so your roles in your LEAs when we talk about assessment changes is just to understand all of us are going to have this period of time we need to unlearn what we thought was true, what we thought how things worked previously. So why do we test learners? When we talk about measurement, that's one of the purposes of assessment, right? And measurement is this assignment of a number or a characteristic to an object or an event. And there's lots of things we measure in our lives. One of which that we measure that seems to be pretty easy to measure is weight, right? How many of you in here weigh yourselves on a regular basis? Do we have anybody who weighs themselves daily? So I'm going to ask you and I don't know each other, so this could be risky, but I want to ask you if you'd be willing to volunteer and help me out with something. Okay? We're going to stand up. I'll bring my mic with me for those of you who are online. So I weigh myself every morning as well, and I have a scale that uses pounds and ounces, right? And we know that you can measure in different increments. We're going to slide this off to the side. Tell me your name.
Larry.
Larry, thank you so much for being willing to step up here and help me. So, again, we're building context about assessment. So I brought a scale. Does the scale you used this morning use pounds and ounces? Pounds. Okay. So I'm going to give you this scale. We're not going to ask you to tell us the number that shows up on it. But I'm going to set it back here. And would you mind stepping on that scale? You'll have to just tap it to turn it on and then step on it. And then we're going to ask you a few questions. Okay, you have the number? All right. Is it the same number that you saw this morning when you stepped on the scale?
Approximately, with the clothes on, 4 pounds heavier.
4 pounds heavier. Oh, so you disclosed a lot more than we even needed to know. But it is a different number, right? What are some of the explanations? And Larry's given us one possible explanation. What are some explanations on why that number is different just a few hours after we used a scale to weigh himself earlier today?
He ate breakfast.
So one suggestion is that he's consumed some food, which is intaking calories and weight. Yes?
Different measurement tool, because it's calibrated different scales, and then your scale may be on a floor, the scale's on carpet, it affects the tool.
Okay, so you use the word calibration in the device or the tool that we're using to measure Larry's weight with right now, that there's some variations, that even though scientifically we can measure weight very precisely, there's still variations that come into play, right? Any other explanations?
He lives in a higher altitude area.
Lives in a higher altitude, so the change in environment could, I don't know whether that could be true or not, but it's something that we could consider, right? Okay.
And I have my wallet here. It's got more money in it than what I was wearing this morning when I weighed.
So yeah, the wallet and all that comes along with it is added weight. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate your help.
Thanks, Larry.
So again, when we think about this, how much harder is it for us to measure learning? Right? We acknowledge an assessment, and even those who spend their lifetime studying, developing assessment, understand that it's difficult and impossible, really, to determine a student's true score on any test. But with our tests, we get this confidence interval that comes on the reports that we get. And there's a lot of work and research that goes into determining those confidence intervals. And what that says is that inside that confidence interval, we have a high degree of confidence that if you were to take the test, step on the scale over and over and over, your true weight or a student's true knowledge is somewhere within that band. So again, that's an important thing to think about when we talk to people about assessment, especially when people say, well, it's not a valid assessment. Well, there's some things we want to talk about before we make that judgment. So after we measure, then there's this assessment is a term that's very similar. And Larry started down the assessment road, where we put this evaluation or an estimation, because you talked about on 4 pounds heavier. Now most of us, as soon as we say that, we're making a value judgment, right? Something feels different. As soon as I start to and usually in these groups when I have them step on it, and they look at that number, sometimes it's less than the scale they stepped on, and you can just see this positive feeling start to come over them. And if it's higher, then it's like this drudge. And assessments, and when we start to place value on this number that comes with it, that's part of the context we have to keep in mind too. Anytime we're assessed, or someone that we love is assessed, or we're a teacher and we're getting data back from these assessments, when we start to place value or judgments on that number, then it feels different. The other thing I want to show before we move into the specific details is just a history of change that we've had in assessment in the state of Utah. There's a lot of stuff up there. We started our first statewide assessment, student assessment, in 1990. I don't know if there's anybody here in this room who took that test. You were here when it was administered. I just missed it. I graduated from high school a few years before this, which caused me to think when I saw this slide, I thought, well, I remember taking tests that were supposedly statewide assessments, even in the 70s. The bubble sheet, probably the Stanford 9. I never had anybody talk to me about what that data meant. But we've had assessment that's gone on a long time, but statewide assessments in Utah started in 1990. If we get down to the bottom line there, in 2017 is where we're going to come together on these changes that are impacting us this year. They passed Senate Bill 220, which called to separate the assessment, what's called the state standard assessment, into 2 tests. So SAGE was grades 3 through 11 originally, and then those of you who've been in assessment, paid attention, 11th grade was pulled out and made optional, and so then it was 3-8, either on the second or third year of that 5-year contract. And then this last year there was a policy decision that was made that pulled writing out of grades 9 and 10, and we'll talk about that as well. So you've got all this confusing change that's going on, that people, what's going on, who's making these decisions. So we have a legislative bill. It also changes our accountability rules, which we have time. If we have time today, we'll talk about that. Then in 2018, so this next month, on the end of October, our contract with AIR, who provides the SAGE test, expires. It was a 5-year contract. It was going to expire at the end of that period. That just happens to coincide with about the same time the Senate Bill 220 is passed. So concurrently to that, we have this RFP process to determine who's our new vendor for our state assessment, state standards assessment. And the committee that went through that selected Questar as our new vendor. Could have just as easily been AIR that won that contract, but they weren't selected. So Questar, we have this change in vendor also to go along with the change in policy. So now we get to 2019, 18-19, and we have this new changes coming in. So the legislative context, this bill behind me or on the screen, is what we call the Utah Standards Assessment, which again was previously known as the SAGE. And originally was grades 3 through 11, then 3-10, then writing was extracted out of it. And you'll see from that legislative language, it's very prescriptive in what this test has to be. So as employees for the state board, our job is to make sure that we can meet those under the context of the vendor that we have. It also has to be criterion referenced, has to be aligned to core standards, and we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. So I want just to make a mental note. This test is required to align to core standards, and it has to be administered online and computer adaptive. Those are all part of the actual bill. So this new test, remember Senate Bill 220 calls for a separation. This new test is it's called the high school assessment, and it is for grades 9 and 10, and it only has 2 requirements. Notice the one that's missing, not required to align to the Utah core standards, might seem odd to a lot of educators. It requires that this test is predictive of the student's college readiness score, which right now is the ACT test, and that it provides a growth score from grades 9 to 10. For accountability purposes, we need growth scores between 8 and 9 as well, which we'll be able to do. So we'll talk specifically about that test here momentarily. So back to the Utah Standards Assessment, which was previously known as SAGE. It's undergone some legislative changes, a new vendor. Now this test is what we've rebranded as RISE, Readiness, Improvement, Success, and Empowerment. The reason it's been rebranded has to do with the fact that there's been enough changes to what people understand the SAGE should be that it doesn't make sense to keep the same name because it's hard to get clarity on those changes, what's the same and what's different. So let's talk about that. So what changes with the RISE? Rather than me talk about this, I want you to turn to a partner, shoulder partner, and look at these bullets on the screen and talk about them in the context of somebody in your LEA comes to you and asks you questions about these things that are new. These are different than the SAGE. And they say, what about the SAGE? What's different? Can you talk to me about it? So talk about it with a shoulder partner. Then we'll come back together as a group and we'll address questions that you have individually. So go ahead and we'll give 2 to 3 minutes depending on your progress. This is where we can get noisy.
We were all given all this. I didn't quite understand what the multi-stage adaptive was, and now this is out there now. I understand. I have no idea what you're ready for. So that I'd already heard about all this.
The multi-stage, the way I understand that is the assessment is designed so that we can not, depending on the skills and the students can leaving those notes.
Yeah, and they could have before.
Right, and what you had
I just figured they'd get most of their questions from the WIDA world. No? From their
Nope.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know, that probably is the part that says it because it has to go with
There's got to be a
standards.
threshold,
Yeah, and so that's probably what is this answering the standards, and then we're seeing where the student is.
Reading those. One of my directors said, the good thing about it is that it allows it was something about because and then she said that's how they're determining that they're going to get it for additional years. You have until 11.
Okay, that's when you stop?
Yep.
I'll end right there.
Okay, thanks.
Is that a supplement or anything else?
still supported English language students assessment versus disadvantaged or whatever. That was my answer. But again, I don't have it.
Okay, we'll come back together in 15 seconds, so kind of wrap your thoughts up. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, who has a question about the things that are different with the RISE test that we could address as a group? Or do you feel pretty comfortable? Yes, go ahead.
I've heard that the adaptive nature is different, and I don't know what the adaptive nature explains.
Okay, yeah, so up here, this multi-stage adaptive versus item adaptive. This is an interesting change that's taken place, and I believe our students will recognize this difference because it's going to affect the interface. So to explain this, I don't know, could I get maybe 5 or 6 of you to stand up, and I'm just going to do a little exercise. There's no scale involved. Okay, so step over here to the side where we have a little bit of space. Let's say these individuals represent individual test items, right, inside of a test bank. And so right now I want you just to kind of stand haphazardly, however you want to stand, not in a row. Okay, so we've got this test that we're going to enter, and these individuals represent test questions. So as a participant, I enter on an item adaptive test, which is what SAGE was. I enter the test at any point. So I could enter on this question, that question, there. I enter the question, I respond to the question, and as soon as I move past that question or submit it, the algorithm in the system makes the decision about what's my next question based on my response to that one. So I get it right, it might send me over here. I get it wrong, it might send me here. And it does that for each question. So item adaptive testing. Now, let me have 2 of you line up in a row, and then 2 in a row. Well, actually 3 in the back row. So, like this, yeah. Sorry. So you guys are row 2, and you're row 1. So now we have a multi-stage adaptive test, and this is a smaller number. On the test, there'll be 40 to 50 questions depending on the test, and there'll be 2 stages. Stage 1 then would have about half of those questions, and inside that stage represents full representation of depth of knowledge and difficulty and core reporting categories. I'm going to enter the test as a student, and I'm going to answer this question. I'll move on to the next one, and the next one, and then I might say, oh, question 1, I didn't do that one right. I can come back, respond to question 1 differently, and I have full navigation within stage 1. When I finish stage 1 and hit submit, then the algorithm makes a decision and tells me which AUG, they call it, is my stage 2. And that's going to be unique based on the data they've collected from a battery of questions rather than an individual question each time. Does that help make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You have a question?
I don't even know if you're going to answer this because I can't get it clear in my head. How are you going to score that?
And when you say how are we going to score it, what do you mean?
Well, how is that a comparative score? If I test poorly in my first battery, or my first, which column? Level?
Stage.
Stage, there it is.
Or AUG, or this.
If I test poorly in that first stage, and I then go to an equivalent stage to how I did on the first or whatever, wherever it puts me, but the person sitting next to me in my same grade level and same cohort does well in the first one and moves to another, how are we now comparative?
Yeah, so remember that the blueprint is the basis of our test. So we have this blueprint we've designed that's going to tell us how many questions every student in the test needs to get in the content. And then the blueprint, if you remember from the SAGE blueprint, it also has in the blueprint a requirement on DOK. So every participant has to get a certain percentage of questions from DOK 1, 2, 3, and 4. Depending on the test. And if you remember the blueprint, let me finish that part. The blueprint will show, it won't give a prescriptive, so if it says DOK 3, for instance, it'll give you a range, and it did this on the item adaptive 2, that everybody's got to get between, let's just throw out a make-up number, 10 to 20% of their questions are coming from DOK 3. So even on item adaptive, you'd have that variation in there, but the blueprint guides that. And then remember, the content questions are all coming from development and alignment with our core standards. So we've got to guarantee every student gets full exposure to the full breadth of the content or the core, and full exposure to the DOK. Some people, we're going to see, is the ceiling high enough, we raise that ceiling high enough that we want to see how high they can climb. So some of them are going to get more exposure to deeper DOK levels than other participants.
So I do poorly in the first set, and I end up in the second set. I do really well in the second set. Will it then project me, or am I pretty much toast?
So I think what you're getting, the question you're getting at, because this was in my mind the first time I saw this, is if I don't do well on the first stage, is it possible for me to still get proficient on stage 2? Because it's still half of the questions approximately, right? Mm-hmm. And can I get a score of 4 still? Right? And the answer to that is yes. Because of the way those, the proponents of multi-stage adaptive, so we spent a full day debating, because the vendor was proposing multi-stage, which one do we want them to deliver, the multi-stage or item adaptive? And the proponents of multi-stage, they sell the fact that you have better control on your item exposure. So back to item adaptive, it pretty much, the example I gave said there'd be lots of random exposure in there, but in reality, what we find on item adaptive is you have these outlier items that almost nobody ever sees. But on a multi-stage, you can get better coverage of your blueprint. Yeah, those are great questions. Okay, what else do you see there that's new that you might want some definition or clarity about as you have to answer questions with colleagues that you run into?
Sorry, how does the ACT tie to the core standards that was required?
Yeah, so we'll get to ACT or our high school test shortly, and it parlays into ACT.
So I remember when this was originally presented, what was attractive in terms of students that are English learners and students with disabilities was that ability to go back and forth within the range, even if they got incorrect answers. Can you give us a little bit more clarification on how that works?
Within the stage, the full navigation piece. Yeah, so they'll... our previous system allowed for that, so a student could go back and forth, but the decision by the algorithm was already made. So it was inconsequential in terms of their future direction on how it was going to navigate through the system. In this one, those decisions, as they move back and forth and adjust their answers and responses, that's the part that I think as a test taker I would appreciate, because sometimes I'll have cues to my knowledge come up as I see exposure to other content. I'm like, oh yeah. And to be able to go back. So I think the test writers and the people who are behind this, they don't purport that it'll be more accurate necessarily, but I have to believe it's a better experience for the student. So
you'll still be able to go back to past stages?
No.
Okay.
No.
So once
just
you submit
within the
a stage,
stage,
you will not be able to go back?
Yeah. Okay.
Can you tell us about the reporting, the new reports? Before I had heard that would be automatic for parents, teachers. How's that going to work?
Okay, so this is a great one, because this one, if you look at it closely, this is me being a salesman to you a little bit, so you should call me out on it. He's promised is better new reporting, right? We haven't got those, and so you could question, how do you purport that when you don't actually have them to show us what they look like? The reason I word it that way is because with the new contract, it gives us a chance to revise our reports without having to amend a contract with the vendor and incur additional costs. So we've been, our staff has been working this summer, started last spring and this summer, and our overall goal with the report, the ISR, individual student report, is to improve our report so that it can, a typical parent could be handed the report, make sense of it without having to have an educator sit next to them and interpret. So typical. Now, what is a typical parent? I don't know, but we're trying to simplify it that way. In terms of how quickly those reports are available, there won't be a change in speed on that, but because we have changes in our assessment system, so this past year, the science, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, there was delayed reporting on that, because we had to go through a standard setting process, because the board adopted new science standards a few years ago, and we had to write questions associated with the new core. So this next year, science will be, 6th, 7th, 8th grade science will be fine. The other sciences, that revision process for standards is still underway, so there's no changes right now on that. Language arts becomes our challenge next year, because previously, the language arts scale score included writing and reading. The writing represents about 30% of the student's ELA score on the SAGE. Now we're pulling writing out, and it's going to be reported as an individual report for writing in 5th and 8th grade. So we can't, remember this confidence interval we're talking about, even though we still are using the same items because the standards haven't changed, our confidence interval, we can't say what that is until we go through a standard setting process after completion of the testing to see if we pull the writing out, does that scale score for ELA that we've been using for 5 years, can we still use that with a high enough degree of confidence that that student scores within that range that we think would be their true score, that we can publish it. So for ELA, this coming year, there'll be delayed access to the student score on that. Math, there should be instantaneous, so when the student hits submit, they get the score, and then the reporting cycle would be the same as it's been with SAGE.
Would that be the same for then the 5th and 8th grade writing score?
Yeah, yeah, so we're actually moving forward with being able to give the writing score immediately upon it being scored. And we'll still use artificial intelligence to score. We train that with our rules. And then there's 20% of the items get human scored. So 100 people take the test, 80 of them get an instantaneous score. 20% of those items have an instantaneous score but doesn't go to the student because it gets human scored as part of our effort to try to maintain that confidence interval, this calibration we talked about, to make sure our system is scoring the way we've trained it. Okay. All right. Any other questions on this? All right. Those are wonderful. So what stays the same? And this is really important for our education community to understand. It's still aligned to the Utah core standards. We still use the Utah Item Bank. We've spent 5 or 6 years developing items with Utah educators. It goes through a rigorous process before it gets in the item bank. Those are still ours. Other states have paid millions of dollars to Utah to lease those items. Just if you didn't know that, that's an amazing thing that those items are of that quality that other states like Florida, Tennessee, others have leased those because they didn't have the capacity to develop their own like Utah had done. We'll maintain, and this has got a little asterisk by it, maintain the performance level descriptors, scale scores, and trend data. I've already talked to you about the language arts. It's unknown for sure, but as we work with the vendor, if we can have 15 years of trend data on ELA, now that's a dream because standards will probably be modified in there. And remember, it's always based on what are the standards we're assessing and teaching and assessing. But our goal with our vendor is to maintain that comparability as much as possible. Science, as you know, is undergoing changes. So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science from 18 is baseline year for that data. But ELA, there's a potential for us to have 15 years of that data because this contract with Questar is a 10-year contract. It still is adaptive, and there are still interim and benchmark assessments as productivity tools for teachers. There are some challenges with this. So the interim for ELA, because it was dependent on a scale score, which we now don't have, we can't prove confidence in it with writing pulled out, there won't be interim ELA tests available this year. The benchmark test for ELA will be there. And then for science 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we're still in the early stages of developing items for that, so there aren't interim or benchmark tests this year for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science, just as a simple fact that we haven't been able to develop enough items for that yet.
What's the timeline on that? If you go back one, just for the availability of the benchmark, teachers being able to accept that.
So yeah, this is an anxiety issue in my office right now. Yesterday there was a stressful moment. Staff was running around. It's scheduled, benchmarks, to go live October 1. So we're approaching our first significant, all of our other dates we've had with our vendor, we've been able to either meet or be really close to meeting. This is our first one that's going to be visible statewide. Did we meet this with our vendor? So October 1. Interims and summative, November 1. In fact, this slide we were going to will show that. November 1, because some of your LEAs have a fall testing window for these assessments. The vast majority of you don't test in the fall for summative. Good for you, because you'll let somebody else work through any challenges that come up, but that's the window we're on. And again, your assessment directors are good at keeping these dates in front of you and your LEAs, because within these dates, your LEAs submit an individual assessment plan. So let's talk about Utah Aspire Plus in our last 6 minutes. There are some exciting things about this assessment that I want to talk about. And I'm just going to lay some context out for the RFP. So those of you who've worked in RFPs before, you know that when you write an RFP, you can put in language in the RFP that either eliminates vendors or really promotes certain vendors to being selected, because you determine in the writing process how you're going to score things. So when I sat down here with this team, we decided to write this in a way I've never written an RFP before. So we were very explicit in making sure that the writing committee didn't make the decision. And the way we did that is we said we're going to accept 3 types of proposals, 3 distinct types of proposals for this RFP. Off the shelf, that's things like ACT Aspire, ACT Plan, SAT has off the shelf. You just go into a store, buy a test, give it. Then we says we know people can write custom solutions. That's what Questar did for the 3.8 and AIR did for 3.11 before. And then we said, what if there's something we haven't seen before? What if there's a hybrid version? And we weren't aware of any solution, but we put that out there, and we received proposals on all 3 of those. The scoring committee reviewed those proposals, and Pearson's hybrid solution was selected as the best option for Utah. So there's some things that make this really exciting that we're going to talk about. I want to note that the contract was signed June 7th. The contract with Questar was signed middle of February. So just keep that in mind too as we talk about why year 1 is not the final year. That why can't we have everything by year 1? To be able to implement a statewide assessment system in less than a calendar year, extremely challenging. To do 2 of those, it's like the stars have lined up perfectly against me. And to just make it hard to sleep at night, right? Okay, so some of the things that have changed. Utah has this item bank for 9th and 10th grade core that we were using with SAGE that has highly developed, highly valuable, and we are still using some of our items, right? And they're aligned to the Utah core standards. To be able to have this predictive score for the ACT, we will use some of the items will be out of ACT's item bank, ACT Plan's item bank. We'll still have the 4 subtests, English, reading, math, and science, just like ACT. It'll be a timed test. So this is our students' first exposure to a timed test. Accommodations are still there. Students will still be able to access those accommodations. And then it's a fixed form test. It's delivered on a computer system, but it's not adaptive at all, like we described over there. Everybody sees the same questions, just like ACT. There's a unique testing window. So you have this ACT test we give in 11th grade, and if you're paper pencil, it's on a certain day. Some of you probably send everybody else home and just administer to 11th graders because it's hard to manage a test like that, proctoring a test like that. This test is a window, and your LEAs will decide how they're going to administer it within that window. This is exciting, not just to this group, but statewide. This test will be available in Spanish transadaptive form. So your EL students will be able to take this test in the Spanish EL students will be able to take this in Spanish. Exciting. First time in our state. It's not the first time nationwide that the transadaptive is available, but it's our first venture into that venue. I will say that the solution we've selected, this hybrid version, it's the first of its kind anywhere. And other states are already contacting us in Pearson to say, what is this? And it's exciting because you're still using your state standards to deliver this test and meeting this requirement for predictive score. There'll be a secure parent portal. There'll be benchmark summative scores. This is parent portal. Parents and students will be able to access the data real time. Student takes a test at school, goes home, can sit down with the parent and access it. There'll be no open response questions. And for our Braille large print students, because they're a fixed form, we'll print those and ship those paper pencil directly to the school. That's exciting to lots of people who are involved in that. So we're still aligned to the Utah core standards. Remember, legislatively it wasn't required. One of our challenges educationally is when we start to administer off-the-shelf tests, it drives our teachers' instruction to standards that are not adopted by your state boards of education. It's one of their biggest authorities. Their primary jobs is to make sure we have quality standards in our state and that teachers then have the resources to teach those. This hybrid solution allows for the tests to be aligned to the Utah core standards. So I'm going to give you an example of how that is. And there's some challenges within this because think about 9th grade. We don't have a 9th grade science class, right, that every 9th grader takes. So there's some challenges with that. And we generally have a 9th grade math test called Secondary Math 1, but there's about 3,500 students who don't take Secondary Math 1 in the 9th grade. So, we've got some challenges, but so how this has started to develop is we sit down with the Utah core and we get the blueprints and we start to look at our items. And we look at ACT's items and say, okay, which of their items align with this standard, this one, this one, this one. And then we take our Utah items, fill it in, so the test is fully aligned with our Utah core standards. Secondary Math 1, which is the test, the math subtest that we're aligning the ACT Utah Aspire Plus to. There are only 9 questions in the ACT bank that align with Secondary Math 1. Is that amazing? Some of you probably say, yeah, I knew it didn't align with our standards. There's 12 questions in the ACT bank for the plan that align with Secondary Math 2. So where I said we'd have about a 50-50 split, these are 2 examples where we can't do a 50-50 split because we're not going to take ACT items that aren't aligned with our core standards and insert into these 2 tests. So you'll see, and the solution for this is still being developed. You'll hear about this as we move forward, the challenges we have, and trying to get back so that when we get done with the test, we have a confidence interval that's narrow enough that we can say to the public, your student's score falls within this, and we're really confident that that means your student's likely going to get score X on the ACT. Okay? Benchmarks will be available, and that's not until next year. The computer system we use is TestNav, which is the same computer system the ACT has delivered for those of you who take that digitally. We'll continue to use SGP. We've got a speed up here. There will be practice questions, samplers available in 2019. Local control of proctoring and local control of accommodations is a big deal. Those of you who have been involved with ACT, to get accommodations approved through ACT for the 11th grade ACT is like an act of Congress. And it's very difficult and it's frustrating to everybody along the way. This hybrid, we don't have to petition ACT for those. We control those locally. Dates that we have coming up. And again, your test administrators, your test assessment directors will be able to talk more specifically about that. But my time is up. I want to finish with just one last request for questions that might have from the field that I could answer. Yes?
So if the adaptation is local control for the
Aspire, Utah Aspire Plus.
Aspire Plus, thank you, Utah Aspire Plus. Will that help the student in their application for the adaptations to the ACT in 11th grade?
I don't know the answer to that. My experience with ACT would lend me to guess the answer is no.
Because it is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
But if it can be aided to the student, I think that's also an added bonus to the student to take this.
Yeah, my life experience, not any inside information with this opinion, it's just my life experience with ACT is they won't change their requirements, and this won't necessarily help that in any way. The documentation they require previously will still all be required moving forward. So, great question though. Yes?
What accommodations will be available for ELs on the RISE test?
Okay, so the accommodations policy manual will be out shortly, and we're waiting to work out all the details on how the system works for the RISE. We don't expect any changes on the accommodations that are available or the accessibility. So you had accessibility features that were available, and then you had accommodations. We expect those to be the same. There might be some minor changes in how those, maybe a title or a label of one of those, or how we access those in the system. But one thing I should say, this foray into transadaptive testing, the contract that we had with with Questar. That was far enough down the road. When we started talking about this, it was too late to do anything without doing a contract amendment. I will tell you I've already approached Questar and asked them to put together a proposal for a contract amendment so I would know how much it costs, what their capability is, to allow us to then petition the board to see if they would support that, to request a contract amendment to provide transadaptive Spanish to our Questar RISE test as well. That's not something that I promote widely because there's a lot of unknowns between now, the idea stage, and getting it implemented. But just so you know, that's a goal that the leadership at the State Board of Education has, is to continue to expand on that so that when we test students, we're testing their content knowledge, not their knowledge on language, English acquisition.
And just to be clear, that was a recommendation on ESSA. That was pretty clear in relationship to assessing content knowledge in the language they understood.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I've gone just over, but I appreciate your patience. So,
thank you. Okay, so if you look at your agenda, we're going to go through this fairly quickly so I can get you out on time. And thank you so much, Darren. You're very clear and focused, and so that was really helpful. As soon as I get the link to all the blueprints, so I'm going to email you, I'm going to send it out to you. Okay. Because the blueprints for the actual assessment you all should see, because it'll be the percentages in relationship to DOK levels, which is really critical. Typically in most of the classrooms that we've seen focus with no, we're talking about content classes that have integrated ELs into their content classes. Even those, the DOK levels are very low, usually 1. So this is not helping them be college ready if the only thing they ever see is like a DOK 1 level. Okay, yeah, question.
Are there those slides available?
Yeah, I'll send...
you send it to me, and then I'll send it out to everybody.
I'll strip the videos, because I've probably broken copyright rule by just linking to
Can
the
you tell us
YouTube.
where that video is? I wanted that video for anything else.
Yeah, there's another video we didn't get to, but I'll strip those because they're too big to...
Yeah.
The file gets too big.
So just give us the link to the video, and then we'll send it to them, and they can... Thank you, Darren, very much. Thank you so much. So let's look where it says updates. See where it says Title III adjustments because of Title I? So I'm going to give a big thank you to Ogden School District. In the meeting that we had in the spring, when they ran their own data, it was very clear that the way in which the linear function of a 0.4 would be very clear that it would take 10 or 12 years for kids to be proficient. And so the thing that was really important about this is CCSSO, which is the Chief Council of State School Officers. We had the advantage of having one of the most influential people in EL indicators, Pete Goldschmidt, come, and he did a consultation. And guess what he said? He said that 0.4 linear approach, your kids, the trajectory is, 10 or 12 years. That's a problem. So then what we did is we looked at other approved plans, and the consultation was interesting because they were surprised that the EL indicator, now this is the EL indicator for Title I, right? Because Title III accountability is now in Title I. Okay. And Title III accountability is also connected to state accountability. So everything is connected. Okay. So what Dr. Goldschmidt said to us was, okay, there are a lot of people who are already writing amendments to their state plans, their ESSA plans, because there are problems. So we recommend that you do an amendment. So we're in the process of doing an amendment that would really be focused on individualized scores for growth instead of a 0.4 for everybody on the planet. One kid who came in at this grade and happened to have, might be a level 1, and another kid coming in, it might be like a level 3, right? So this process, they're working on it, and we're hoping that it will be then a real simple amendment with the methodology defined, and it will be approved. It will not change the 5.0 WIDA composite as showing proficiency. So it's very minimal. It's a minimal change. It's only based on trying to differentiate it, really based on where individual students come in, at what grade, and what proficiency level, so that it's actually more responsive, right, to individual schools and the work that they're providing for a range of English learners at whatever grade level. So we're in a way better place than we were when we had that meeting in May. So I just want to thank Ogden, because I brought this up, but the fact that we ended up having consultants from CCSSO and they did the data analysis was really, it was really perfect. So I just want to make sure you tell all your people in Ogden and tell Rich thank you for speaking up. That's why a safe environment to speak up when you're concerned is really important. So thank you. The status of school fees. I gave you the link to the internal audit. You know that there is, and the reason we're focusing on this, I know this ends up being a really interesting issue. Generally, we can't really say that we're concerned about every child in Utah getting a quality education if they actually don't have access to a quality education because the amount of school fees that are charged are outrageous. And the reason I say outrageous is the internal audit, and you saw in the newspaper that last year, and this was just a random set of school districts, $70 million was collected, not connected to the cost of programs. Okay, so then what happened is, in response to the internal audit, there was a task force that's created, and the Assistant Attorney General here is on that with other legislative analysts and then a group of superintendents and other people. And people from the refugee and resettlement agencies, so you know that we have advocacy on the task force. And then many board members. Their report hasn't come back only because they're responding to the internal audit. In the meantime, the Office of the Legislative Auditors General, and you probably saw it in the newspaper last week, they came out with a report, I send you the link, a performance audit, it's supposed to be audit there, of secondary school fees. So I'd really suggest that you read that very, very carefully. I think they ended up only auditing 10 school districts, and it was something like an excess of $71 million that was collected in fee and not connected to costs of program. The reason this is important is that in the injunction and also in the self-assessment tool, you have to actually sign assurances that says you're actually following not just the audit, but the board rule that says you cannot deny, and civil rights law, that you cannot deny a student rights to quality education based on an inability to pay. Okay, you can't deny a student access to a quality instruction, including activities. So that's a big one because of an inability to pay. Or they come to enroll and you charge a fee, but it's not approved by the board. It's a flat fee, and then you don't let them get their program, their schedule. Okay, no. You can't do that. Okay, everybody has a right, and not to be asked if they're citizens, to enroll in a free public education. Okay, so in the meeting with the superintendency, there were 6 when this report came out last week, and then there was a meeting with state legislators. There were 6 in the room. 6 state legislators talking about, with the fiscal people here, talking about this issue. So my hunch is there's going to be some serious legislation coming in the next legislative session. So what questions do you have before we go to the new grants management system?
I just want to clarify with the self-assessment for Title III, which some of us in this room, that would be like our only part with Utah grants and the big part. Are the other people, like for example, Title I, our state, our superintendents, our fiscal part, are they also responsible for that? And the reason I ask that is just that I don't know how much impact we should be trying to have in Title III, other than maybe the piece of equity and civil rights. But tell me if I'm wrong with that, thinking on the school fees part.
Yeah, I'm going to actually, when we look at this about school fees, and next time I think when we meet in November, I'm going to bring Brian Quisenberry, who is the Assistant Attorney General, because he's really great, and he knows the law backwards and forwards, and he's on the task force. He's actually going to come and spend time with us, because this ends up being, this goes to your point, a really huge issue. The reason Title III is an early adopter, not only because I'm a little bit older than most people, and you never know what will happen. I just wanted to make sure that we had a really systemic way to provide the kind of information that would help us be knowledgeable, right? Because being accountable for things you don't know, that is, or like, being tested on items in an assessment that you haven't been taught. Okay, no, that's like totally unjust. So the reason Title III is done this way is that we're putting the law in the self-assessment system with the civil rights, and that's what this is, with the civil rights law, so that you're knowledgeable and that you can create the evidence for an electronic portfolio that it doesn't matter who's here in Title III. Whenever the feds or whenever the legislative auditors, the state board is, they're very popular for legislators to audit. I think in the last year we've had seven audits. We just had an audit in Title I. So we'll have a legislative audit eventually with Title III. And so, which is good, because this will be in the grants management system, and it'll be clear that everybody knows what the law is, what the civil rights law are, what ESSA is, what the statute is, what the board rule is in relationship to fees, because if everyone actually followed the board rule, then we wouldn't have collected $70 million extra that in no way was connected to the cost of programs. We wouldn't have that situation. So the ultimate question is your point, which is, how committed are we to make sure that every single individual child, no matter if they're poor, no matter if they're an English learner, no matter if they're a refugee student, no matter if they're an immigrant student, has access to a quality education, because those are Utah values. We value children and we value family, not just some families, but all families. There are families, there are kids. So the reason I've tried to do the grants management system that way is that you just upload 2 documents. So one is the self-assessment tool and the new application. And both are linked to school visits and feedback on the quality of the instructional program. So the issue is, and I'm trying to support things that I've heard principals say, if program people don't have access to the Title III budget, if your BA has access to the Title III budget and you don't, you're the program person. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because ultimately the one who's accountable for the program is you, right? So if you don't have access to the Title III budget as the program person, you have to go to your BA or your superintendent or whoever it is, and you have to be, because you're the one who's filling this out with the evidence. You're the one who's going to upload it. You're the one who's responding to the questions based on the support that you're getting from the people in the district and our support, right? This can't be an issue where the BAs have the control and the program people are accountable. And maybe that doesn't happen in your district. I don't know. I'm just saying that the reason Title III is organized this way is it's connecting everything. Federal law, state law, ESSA, civil rights, so that you'll be prepared. You'll have it. It'll be in the grants management system. And the other issue is every state legislator has access to your budgets now. And if at the end of the year you have carryover and we're sending money back to the federal government, what are state legislators going to think? They're going to think you don't need that money, even though it's even supplemental. I mean, it's just supplemental funds, right? So this is the whole thing about being incredibly transparent. You know, if you have carryover, which is, you know, $300,000, either in a state, you know, enhancement grant for at-risk students or whatever, and you're not spending it because you're not asking for reimbursements, you see, I'm just trying to be really logical because now everyone has access to it. So what questions do you have? So I developed instructions to help you link the information from the tool to the actual application, right? So the instructions are really clear. So you're actually using the self-assessment tool for self-assessment and gathering evidence, right? And then you're using the self-assessment tool to apply for funding. See, it's just totally aligned. Now we're hoping that, you know, other people in, you know, Title I and the reading funding and the EARS funding and all that, we're hoping that they can develop that kind of link and consistency to support you, because that's the state agency's responsibility to help you. If you get caught flat-footed, it's, you know, and we're not doing our jobs, you know, it's unfair, I think. I mean, I think it's incredibly unfair. And when we have internal audit calls, and I've actually had 2 already of internal audit complaints about how some districts are spending Title III funds. As soon as I get a call from the internal auditors, right, and they're always anonymous, but usually we ask for, you know, evidence and support materials and all that, because it can't be just like a random complaint. Once that happens, we have to form a team and then actually end up doing a fiscal audit. You know, these are visits. These, you know, this is to help instruction. But then if we have, you know, phone calls from the internal auditors, and the internal auditors call me and say, look, I got this phone call from, you know, this taxpayer about how Title III funds are used, because there might be fraud. So we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen for anybody. Because if you do the self-assessment tool, then you have evidence for what your program, your language program, and the support you provide for ELs. You have all the evidence. You're protecting yourself in relationship to what you're actually providing. Right. So I'm trying to be as... and then the other thing is when you're in school improvement and you're, you know, on the list for turnaround, it doesn't help if you're not being supported in using evidence to evaluate the effectiveness of your program, right? I mean, that's really the point. The point is, okay, you're spending this money, and some people at higher levels will say, oh, they have all the resources they need. Okay, but then I hear from, like, teachers or principals, and they say, no, we don't really have the resources that we need. to work with English learners that would make a difference. So I'm hearing, different things from different levels. And the only way we can do it systematically is to use, the question in the, I don't have the question here, but the question is, how are you reallocating resources based on what the outcomes for English learners are at which schools? You see, you can't just keep using the same formula when, there's a school that's dying. There's a school out there, and you're not using data to evaluate how you're using resources to support that school and that principal. What are you doing with the principal? How are you helping them? They shouldn't be out there floundering, right? We all know this, right? Most of you all have been principals, right? You know how you know how that feels if you're a principal and people are saying you have enough resources, but your kids and whatever's happening, isn't working. So you have to use the data, which that's the point of the question. It's saying, how are you using resources and reallocating them to actually meet the needs of the schools that aren't meeting their growth goals? See? So I'm trying to organize this so it builds a system that is very aware of the needs of the local schools and the support for principals. Because it can't just be up at, I don't have anything against district people, obviously. I was a district person, right? And I was also in a high school. But we have to think right systemically. We can't keep having these barriers where the voices of either parents, or principals, they're not listened to. So it's just a way to create, a transparent environment where we're all working together. So that's enough of my... Do you have any other questions in relationship to the self-assessment tool? And you can call me anytime, and I'll sit down with you and we can talk about it. Yeah.
Not on the tool itself. Sorry. Not on the tool itself, but in the Utah grants. Because I see that there's a separate application for the Title III funding. Do you want us just to attach that as an attachment?
Yeah.
Or copy that into the brief description requirement, or just attach it and then just do a C attachment on the brief description?
Well, if you look at the instructions, I think it'll say that you just upload the self-assessment tool. No. Right, you just upload it.
Okay, because when you submit for the Utah grants, because I've already done two, is that you have to put something in the description section and then also in the budget description section. So because we have a separate application, is it okay if we just reference that C, please, the attached application?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want it to be so burdensome,
because that will just be really simple.
Right, that you're pulling your hair out.
Thank you very much. And then just one note to folks here that they may have not gone to this other meeting with Title I directors. When you submit the budget section, it automatically calculates any indirect costs, so you may have to play around with it and move your cents around till it balances out.
Because the other thing is the indirect cost. I should have brought the M schedule, because it's calculated based on the work that you're actually doing and agreements you've made, the district has made with the state.
Correct.
So then you look at the indirect cost and you'll see, oh, so this is like 3.7, or I think Davis is like 3.7 or something. But
and it's already calculated in there for you.
It's already calculated.
But it's really strange, because if on calculator on paper, with your paper budget, you'll have it all balanced and calculated out. But when you go in there, it's not exact. So you just have to play around with the pennies.
Yeah, and remember, there's always a 2% off for administrative costs, right? So it's 2% off for administrative costs. The indirect costs will be calculated for you already. And just to be clear, there are only 4 districts that qualify for immigrant funding because of the way in which significant increase in immigrants is calculated that was approved by the Department of Education in the 2014 audit, because it wasn't, before that, it wasn't done that way. And so it's approved, but it always goes back to the minimum amount of 10,000. So it's the districts, there are 4 districts that have qualified for, based on a calculation of significant increase in 2 years based on the federal definition of immigrant. And those, tend to be pretty typical. Granite ends up having the most. Alpine Canyons, and Salt Lake. I guess that's 5. So that's that. Just so you know, that's how it's calculated.
Christelle?
Yes.
Is all of Title III in Utah grants to share, or is any of it in UCA still?
No.
You have to do?
Nope.
No UCA?
No, for Title III, no, we're an early adopter. So nothing in UCA for Title III. It's all in the grants management system.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. The last thing is, I talked about the Early College Committee. You should know this, and Danelle, if you want to say anything about it. The Early College Committee, for the last year, the board said, why is it that there are no, in early college coursework, IB, AP, honors, all those kinds of early college preparation courses, how come we don't see any, like, kids of color? There are no ELs, there are no poor kids. And so they said, there's a whole group of underrepresented students that they're not prepared, and they don't even have access to early college coursework. So why is that? So then they established a committee. I was the person who was in charge of students and parents, and did a lot of focus groups with high school kids and parents. And I have those transcripts, and it's really interesting. And maybe next time, I'll give you kind of a copy, anonymous copy, so you can see what high school kids are saying about their experiences, and then parents. And then we had people working with counselors and teachers, and another committee working on policy. And then, do you want to say something about the Access Committee?
Yeah, so this group of people that are working on this particular topic have come and presented to us, I think, 3 times. Mm-hmm. And they're going to come again at our meeting in a couple of weeks and show us the updates. But they've been very receptive to the things that we say. And on the Access Committee, there are 15 people, and 5 are at large, and 10 represent specific ethnicities. So we have Asian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, Hispanic or Latinx, and I'm missing one. Yeah, African American. And then the 5 at large. There's special ed, there's refugees, there's LGBTQ, there's ESL, students at risk, things like that. So they bring a really broad perspective of this issue with the accelerated learning. And the task force, or the committee that's working on this, has been very receptive to the things that we say. And so we've been able to go through, since June, May or June, go through every time they make a revision and give some input into how we can make sure that all students have access to those. So.
Yeah, to early college preparation. And again, in a lot of the data that we've done for course taking patterns, if English learners, and we've tracked this based on kids who got 4-year scholarships with the Eccles Business School. You look at the kids who are getting 4-year scholarships so Eccles Business School is, they have a really impressive program, the First Ascent Scholars. And the ones that we've looked who were English learners, they were reclassified as proficient by 4th and 5th grade. Because as soon as English learners get to middle school, it's like they crash and burn. And then they're like this for a while, and they get to high school, and then they really crash and burn. So the point is, that quality instruction should happen all the time, but in those early grades, we shouldn't end up having long-term English learners, who end up being referred to alternative education systems because we don't know how to work with kids. Right, so just think about that. Really look at what's happening with instruction at the elementary school and your redesignation rates when you get your WIDA, and just kind of look at it and see, like, which school is having really success in redesignating students. See, so because you have like really great instruction in your schools, right? So you want to disseminate that, right? You don't want me to come and visit and say, oh, this like teacher in this classroom is like a star. Why aren't you using what she's doing like across the district, right? Because you do. I mean, I've seen some like really like incredibly amazing instruction. You know, see, I'm starting to salivate because I'm a teacher who loves good teaching, and so I'm actually salivating because it's so incredibly delicious to see teachers doing like such incredible work with kids, right? And we're all in this room because of that, right? I mean, that's why we're here. So the schedule, so the Promising Practices website, we only have the Granite one up. I'll send you, I think I sent you the link. I'm not sure if I did, but I'll send you the link. The Early College Committee for implementation is going to be a challenge because it's asking teachers not to, it's asking for every high school to do open enrollment. You know what that means? That means you don't have all these outrageous requirements for kids to get into honors classes or AP classes, because you only want kids that you're sure they're going to get a 3 and then you're going to get money. Okay, because we changed it.
Does that include concurrent enrollment? Because higher ed is really difficult that way to work with concurrent enrollment with their entrance tests and that kind of thing.
Well, then we have to work on them.
Wish somebody would.
Yeah, just like the Occuplacer for Salt Lake. You know, I meet adult refugees who know 3 languages, and on the Occuplacer they got 8th grade instead of 10th grade in English, and so then they can't go to Salt Lake Community College. So we actually have like a lot of work to do with higher ed.
We have some of that problem with our English learners even getting into the DATC in their junior and senior year because they can't pass that test.
Yeah, you'd think there'd be other ways to, you know, assess people's desire and motivation to do really quality work. I mean, you would think. So let's take that on. Yeah.
We're also access some of the suggestions we've made even go into the elementary gifted and talented programs, because we find those are often, you know what they look like. Anyway, so we're even looking at that and making sure that even as a district, there is a talk about percentage of students, but even as a district, if you don't have a program in every school, every elementary school, then you've got to be able to do it district-wide and have those percentages there. So that's something we're looking at, too, in the elementary level.
Yeah, I always use the example, you know, Einstein knew science, but he didn't really know English, right? He started out speaking German, and he knew science. So then he's, you know, because, you know, if you have academic language in your first language, which I keep on trying to help people understand, why do you keep telling families not to speak Spanish at home? You should have them reading books in Spanish. They should be, you know, but oh no. So I don't know. So that's up to all of you, too. You have to keep telling teachers and principals not to say that to, you know, families that speak other languages. It's, you know, really shaming, right? And it doesn't value the asset they bring.
Just on that vein, with equity of opportunity, I wonder if the same way we've been having conversations with the special ed department and the curriculum directors, could we bring those in charge of gifted programs, CTE, and any other programs that we see that lack of equity, and start that conversation at this level?
Yeah, I think that's really important because there was actually someone, and we're gonna go. Could you just pick this one up? This is the Ensuring English Learner Students Can Participate Meaningfully and Equally in Educational Program. It's titles 6 of Civil Rights. It's the EEOA of 1974. It's what's actually in your self-assessment tool. And it's saying, where are you? The point is, you know, you should be honest. You should be honest about where you are, and then, right, figure out where you're going to get to. I mean, that's why we do self-assessments, right? That's the point. So identifying and assessing all potential ELs, this goes back to the point with special ed. You know, I still hear people say, and I said this before, Well, once they're a 5 on WIDA, we'll assess them for a disability. Okay, no. Okay, no. Please, if you hear people say that, please say no. No, you can't do that. And providing language assistance services. Now, language assistance services is really important. There's hardly any data that shows English immersion to be effective at all. The law says you have to provide language assistance services in some way, right, by someone who's actually qualified. You just can't say we don't have any responsibility and we don't even know who our ESL students are. Okay, even if you have 6, you should know who they are. Okay, so the next one is, this goes back to our conversation, staffing and supporting, and qualified teachers. And I know some people have, have issues related to OCR as well as ELD pullout and all that. But if your ELD instruction is not rigorous and not aligned to the content, then it's not helping anybody, right? So that's what we mean by evaluating the effectiveness of your program. Providing meaningful access to all curricular and extracurricular programs. Now look, extracurricular programs. This is the issue of fees. You all know this, right? EL students are entitled to an equal opportunity to participate in all programs, including pre-kinder, magnet, gifted and talented, career and technical education, athletics, advanced placement, international baccalaureate courses, clubs, honor society. Okay, that's their civil right. This is not about an opinion. This is actually their civil right. Avoiding unnecessary segregation. Now this goes to tracking. If your 9th graders don't have access to early college courses, including biology, you're violating their civil rights. And you go to a class, and the only thing you see are, kids who are probably English learners. And they're tracked, right? They don't get access to biology, they don't get access to chemistry, they don't get, opportunities to take physics. One solution that we did in California is we actually had applied physics early on, like in 9th grade, and they had a range, so they could take biology, integrated. Well, all the integrated science was done in middle school. Biology, applied physics, and so you saw this huge increase in students in AP science classes, advanced mathematics, all that kind of stuff. It took us 10 years to do it, but we did it. So there's no reason Utah can't do it. So you have to pay attention to those the sequence of courses. You should go to your schools and look at the sequence of courses that kids have access to. Evaluating EL students, special education, providing dual services. Okay, we said that. This is pretty clear. Meeting the needs who opt out. When English learners opt out, okay, even though they opt out, they're still entitled to services. So it would be like any kid who's struggling, right? You have to actually support the child. And sometimes families opt out because, they're worried because they're undocumented, right? So you shouldn't be tracking them down because they're undocumented. You should just take what they say, and then you should support them. Monitoring and exiting EL students. Okay, so there are some districts that do like an amazing job of monitoring and exiting students, so they don't, because it gets so content gets increasingly more challenging, right? And so if the instruction isn't focused on the way context-embedded content language and how it's used in the content area, then they're going to fall behind, right? Because it's challenging. So you have to get clear about teaching academic language and what that looks like, and teaching academic conversations and what that looks like, because they're not going to develop that language unless they use it. They can't just sit and listen to teachers talking to them about it. Okay, and you know all this, but the reason I'm going through this is because it's civil rights. It's like a civil rights law. This is like law. It's not like an opinion. I keep on saying that because someone actually wrote something when we were assessing this. The teacher said, well, I don't agree with that. This is my opinion. I'm thinking, okay, no. And then the last page, this goes back to the application for Title III. Okay, don't stay stuck. You have to evaluate the effectiveness of your program and look at how resources are allocated, and be strong when you're dealing with your finance department. Okay, you guys know, I mean, you're the ones who are the experts, have committed your lives to English learners, so, you know, you have to say something. And then meaningful communication with limited English proficient parents. Okay, and this is not about supplemental funding because this is a right. So if you have parents who are speaking different languages, then during parent-teacher conferences and everything, you know, you first of all, even as far as confidentiality, having a child, you know, be the translator in a parent-teacher conference about their progress, okay, so, okay, just don't do that. You have to really organize for translators, right? So why would you trust the kid talking about his own? Yes.
Question?
Sure.
On page 3, it's talking about school districts have to monitor the progress of former ELs
Yeah.
for at least 2 years.
Oh, yeah, that's an old one.
Change?
Yeah, it's 4.
It's 4 now.
Yeah, so you should change it because that was 2. That's the old No Child Left Behind and all the other ones, but now it's 4. And the reason why we really went with 4 is because oftentimes it's really challenging to get a team together, as we know with special ed and EL, and have the teachers really focus on what the kids are actually doing in the content, right? Davis has a really good system of monitoring. Provo has a really good system of monitoring, and I don't know, we might want to hear about how they do it.
Love to.
Would you be Connie and Michelle? No. The next meeting. Because once you get to the point where it's systematized, right, and everybody knows whose responsibility is what, then it's not like this terrible anxiety that you're feeling. And you have people who are doing it like brilliantly. So shouldn't we learn from the people who are doing it brilliantly? I mean, I think that's the point. Okay, other questions? We have 15 minutes. I know this is a lot, but you know, you're brilliant people, so I know. Yes.
I want your opinions.
Uh-oh.
On the continuation or elimination of EL classes where students take, or ESL classes, specifically in secondary. We don't do that in most elementaries, but it's a very heavy practice in the secondary. What is your opinion?
Okay, I'm not going to give you my opinion. I'm going to say one thing. If we're committed to ensuring that English learners have access to grade level content in mathematics, in science, in English language arts, then the way in which teachers are supported with professional development, or however you want to do it, and not just an ESL endorsement, because we know that the translation from abstract ESL things tend not to actually support, and you see a growth in kids at the end of level, their growth toward their academic goals, because you'll see that next year, then you know what you're doing. But teachers who think they want to segregate, that's the other thing. Here, and that's the one that the teacher objected to. Avoid unnecessary segregate, that's on page 2. Avoid unnecessary segregation of EL students. If EL students are in ESL math, which we have no idea what that is, or ESL science, we have no idea what that is, or ESL this or ESL that, or ELD, and there's no connection to any content at the secondary level, then we should be worried, right? It's just as simple as that. Because we're leaving it to you all for us to support you in making those changes based on evidence of whether it's effective or not. Right. How are you evaluating the effectiveness of your programs? I know a school who took the data from 2 years ago. It was a charter school, and they realized that their instruction for level ones was just terrible. And so they redesigned everything. I've actually seen their classrooms. I've seen some of the best physics instruction in that school. And their level 3s and 4s, they didn't get stuck. Now, that's interesting, right? Because, why? Because the content teachers are like unbelievable. They're really unbelievable. The physics teacher had wind turbines on every kid's desk. And they were identifying variables. And there were something like, I don't know, 15 languages in the classroom. So that's really the point. So you have to really get in there. And, you know, teachers should be recognized. You know what I mean? Like if you're Davis or you're Salt Lake with the AP computer science class, or Granite with their learning centers, you know, or Provo or Davis for the work that they've done in monitoring students, you all should be recognized. That's the point. And that's why the Utah Promising Practices website is trying to do that, to say, you know, let's learn from each other. Why don't we learn from each other? Instead of being like stressed out. We should have like happy lives. We shouldn't be like pulling our hair out. And by the way, that's not what I did, so I didn't pull my hair out. And this, again, helps you understand the way the visits are connected to technical assistance. And it gives you the whole list, the final list. And if you want to come in, if you want to be a peer reviewer, if you look at the pages, we have Canyons coming up, and Nancy Ward and Connie are going to be with me. We have another day open if anybody wants to come to Canyons. When we go to.
I would like to.
Okay. So you have to remind me of your name, though.
Promise Larson.
Is promise like really promise?
Yes.
So what did you promise? No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing. Yeah. So do you want to do the? The only thing we have open actually is the Jordan one, which is in February. Well, we have Betty and we have Rhonda and we have Dinah.
I could do that one, Jordan.
Yeah, but there are people who want to, but you've already done one with me. So
if you need more.
Okay. Well, I'm just going
to. That's how much I enjoy the experience. You should jump on it.
She wants to do it again. Okay, Hannah, I'll put your name down. The reason I'm going to put your name down, Hannah, is that I think going to Hillcrest in the 9th grade and seeing their biology class with refugee kids, which is co-taught, you should see. And maybe all of you want to see that. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how we can do that.
When is it? It's in the spring?
No, it's actually November 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yep.
So what we might do is, after we do the visit and do the recommendations and stuff, maybe I'll talk to Karen Sterling and Beverly, and we'll actually organize a way that you could actually see what happens in that 9th grade biology class that is being team taught. Best content instruction, I've ever seen in biology. Yeah. I wish I would have been in the class. So I'll leave with one other thing. There was a 1st grade class that I saw in Salt Lake, and the room was spectacular. And so they've only been in session, 4 or 5 weeks or something like that. So she finishes, she introduces it, she does a connection and all this stuff. And then she hands out the folders, they open it up, put your finger on the square. Okay, so this is a square day. And then she says, put your finger on the number. Okay, so that's the station. They all get up. They go to their stations. And so, I toddle over to this one little station. And there's this girl there. And 2 boys. No offense to the men in the room. They were a little distracted, the boys. I've seen this consistently in some rooms. Sorry, men. And the girls are organizing them. So this girl is kind of organizing them. One little boy has like a Lego lollipop, and he's sharing that he has a Lego lollipop. Another little boy is taking out this big bin with all these animals. So all of a sudden, he's saying, what's this? And so this little first grader, this girl keeps on saying, oh, that's a centipede, that's a tarantula, she's naming like all these insects in this box. And the teacher comes over, and then she knows exactly. So she goes to the reading center, she gets the book, she knows exactly what she has to do. Now, this is a woman who could be the president of the United States in maybe about, 15 or 20 years. Amazing. So I'm going to really encourage you when you visit classrooms to look for talented kids, make a connection with them, and make sure they don't get lost when they get to middle school, especially girls, right? Because, we have all these rich resources in our children, right? And they're going to create a future that we want them to love. I mean, that's really the point. Any other last questions? We ended 6 minutes early. Thank you for being such a great group and making my life much better than it is. So, thank you. Take care. Wait a minute. And if anybody needs other help or questions, you can stay after. So if you need any questions or help, you can stay after.
Nice meeting you. Yeah, you too. Good luck. Thanks.
Not because of you, but I just know everybody. Yeah, everybody does. So we were part of the that's the year that we want to yes. That's good. That's I will because otherwise for a new teacher, yes. So spring they were because we talked at the beginning of the year to make sure that clicks. Oh yeah. Thanks again. And so I just wrote to somebody over there for a follow-up to see because they assured me. I know it doesn't seem like it. It's only a year and a half. And there's only a small portion that was so I just made my own little one for us in the district, and we'll see. And this one will be much better. Yeah, easily. Thanks. 65. So we're just one to add. Oh, okay, great. I can add it. She's totally right. That was like, I started, I was a baby. I started at 20. Oh, good. I don't think we have space for 20. Well, we can always make space. I guess we make space in so we get so Rock Bank and so I was at well, I was at Rock Bank and lost it. Well, that's fall. That's right, yeah, that's a long time ago. When? Wanted to talk to them. Didn't idea. I'd like to put together. One of these things yeah, I have a friend in yeah, how about a bit of I'm just jotting down some things. What is the profession here? My teacher. It's not stuff that you can't get. Okay, let's go do this. I think we can get it on Data Gateway too. It's very simple. Yeah, and I want to have like I'm thinking we need to have this for every. We got a day. I asked so hard for every single school. We can do it for elementary and then secondary. I
asked them, the teachers are endorsed, and they said you have to buy a dashboard. Oh, no, we don't need to do that.
Here's how we do it. Here's how we do it. We decide what's on there, and just create a Google Doc. It's really simple. Right. And then I go into data dashboard and I pull it. It's pretty dang simple. I can do it.
Right.
It's no
I just
problem.
wanted to know.
Oh, if they could have one to school. Well, no, here's what we do. We do a Google Doc with a tab for each school. Or you can do a tab that is elementary, and a tab that is secondary, and a tab for elementary. Then it breaks it down. We could do that. Oh, yeah. So I'm just thinking enrollment in high academic courses, because I have last year's data on it, and I can pull it in the same county that where they are now. And then I look at which, are there any classes that have success, we go from there. But what is the requirement? I'll send that to you. And then you guys add to it, and then you come together and say, what will be the data dashboard? Let me grab. And then I'd also like to find out what is the data that we're using.
On one day in the morning.
When I talk to Sarah, everybody says, oh, it's so successful.
Oh, unless, no, we never do that. People ask. Right. So in the morning,
what's our criteria? Because I did ask that in spring last year when we were doing graduation. I said, so what are we celebrating? I gave them a page of the celebration, and I can see it's all about the events and culture.
That's kind of where we thought, criteria, you could focus on actually yours.
I know, so like, but I'm doing that, but like even Sarah said, it's a very successful program. So, because I'm sitting here, so I made myself a note and I put it on my key to find out. I'm going to ask Thais to say, how do you judge success?
Okay, so, well, and
then I'd like to know, and I'm sure that Thais has got to be, yes, looking at that.
I have to go back and talk to them. All these questions, we have no way to look at these.
Okay, oh, so that's up.
So that's, he's teaching me the steps, I don't know what
That's the ESL.
Right, so that we can have some. Yes, we do the quality.
No, I want quantity. Yeah, that's why, no, and I know that she'll give me quality, but I want to know if she's going to offer me quantity. I don't think quantity.
I don't think she just gives you a hard data.
That's what I want to ask. That's look at your kids' data. You guys have a PLC on your kids. Right. It's the same thing. It's like I'm thinking,
There's someone who comes in the middle of the year.
because now I've invested 2 teachers in this.
Yeah.
So we just need her, so I need a person that retired to give us a cheat sheet.
And we still waiting on this.
So yeah, so we're
still waiting.
You've got extra days or elementary.
No, you're not going to contact us.
Well, I'll check on that because that shouldn't be the case because I was there the first 2 weeks of school and there was plenty.
Well, no, now
Because they have enough for 2 full classrooms.
talk to Vivian.
Oh, I will when I go back because there's 2 full teachers, so they should each have a full class.
Yeah, they block people from getting in because there are not enough spaces.
Not enough.
Then you should email me.
The classes are too big. So, yeah, talk to Vivian.
I'm going to find out.
Preparatory
academy, well, that would be a real
And she said, we need a waiting list because then we can say,
because you don't get time.
we need the resources or whatever.
Oh, no, the resources are done. There's 2 full teachers dedicated to this.
Oh, at the high school. The high school
or the elementary.
High school? And I think the elementary.
Hi, Vivian. I'm getting this. Good, how are you doing?
That's why that's part of the anxiety.
Hey.
But sometimes there's a glitch between someone.
I'm sorry. Well, I just have a question. I'm standing here with Rhonda. I think we just were on the list. Is there a waiting list? Lisa Bennett was on the list. She told me to talk to you, but she's never called.
Oh,
where are we full?
Yeah.
Okay. And so they gave me this. I talked to Luke about that because I'm sure, and I've never want to remind everybody that I need lots of extra periods with Isaac. So he has Isaac actually 5 periods.
Are we good?
So Isaac needs to stop following the kids around
and pull more kids out. And I'll go talk to Luke. There's 5 periods that Isaac is paid for out of our budget.
I know this
A lack of continuity. I was a little concerned because there was also feedback from, did you know that there were different representatives from school boards? And I don't know.
And is there,
Yeah, I don't know who those.
why don't we talk, and then, is there something going on with Mount Board? Yeah, what, because Patty texted me, what's going on with
I'm not surprised I got in trouble last
I know,
time.
I read like 5 years ago.
But just let me know. Just let me know.
Okay.
Good, how are you? Looks like you're doing good.
Yes, well, I get up, I really get
Gas all blew up.
energized.
That's why they were all up.
Okay.
All these amazing things. So
That's why they so up.
Because I have done the process of ACT accommodation. For students, actually, students, the whole thing before. And I've been successful a couple of times. But I have never seen how they deal with So when it comes to
Yeah, tonight.
but even if one year,
So they were late on the report.
Yeah, she's like, oh, it's just because I copied from another district.
You got a question too?
Yeah, were you in line
No,
already?
not in
Just
line
kind of
already.
standing
Not in line
yeah,
already, so
at
you can ask
a reasonable distance, so we're not, breathing down somebody's neck. And so you're from Ogden? Ogden.
And where are you?
I'm Salt Lake.
Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Oh, you have a billion languages in Salt Lake.
I can't remember what I read. It was like over 50, isn't it?
Oh, I'm
50
sure.
different languages
I'm
spoken.
sure, because the last, I was principal at Lincoln Elementary, which is now Liberty, but we had 22 when I started there, and in 3 years, we had 35. But you may only have 1 or 2,
We have a population that has moved around Europe, and they're probably Roma. They kind of speak Italian, but they also speak Romanian, and you're thinking that, and there's like a big population of them, and then first one came to school, then they sent a couple more. Now we're getting older kids, because they've never sent them to school before, the 6th graders, but they're just not very
trusting, and they live more in a tight
We're
community
having
of
trouble finding translators because it's not like the Romanian language. It's
See, and that's,
it's a hybrid kind
understand, tell me if I'm wrong, that's always been a decision that's been
I know,
up to the
I
school.
know.
So as
I
long
just
as you
took
don't
over
have
the
any specific criteria,
ALS
that's what
position
Roz and I were just
in
talking
July.
about, is
So I've got
we
ELA.
bring together our newcomer group and find out.
And I always had the
that
ELD
we know
coaches
that we're
with my
successful.
literacy coaches.
How do they get in?
We were trying to make it be very much, yeah, I don't very many.
I can track it all down, but it's not driving our action.
They're kind of specialist
And so we
coaches,
really need a
but,
system
so they
like
work,
this, but
because
then I go
the ELA
back
coaches
to
are in the
we
schools
don't
all
have
the
a
time,
system
but the others
like this
are
to
doing,
do.
I mean,
Several schools.
and they're
Is
so
that
doing a lot of
we
district work too, a
counselors,
lot of professional development. It's like, we've got to be, we've got to be able to support language. So I'm trying to make the ELA coaches more, we're just literacy.
And open up, so that we at least have some criteria. So then that will judge it all year long.
ELA program. And so,
What did you learn? What did you talk about?
and then elementary.
And I'm right now willing to allow them to send us what they would like to do.
So are you?
But we're asking them to run an ELD teacher. Yeah, we need to have that conversation, so I'm
absolutely
so all she needs to do is what I'll
them and their PLC
is that we're all on the same page on this, is what they do have to happen, but
they also need to
ELA. So they have an, Wonders now has an ELD program as well?
and then we'll start to set some criteria.
Yeah, and so we've been using,
At least they get to be a part
takes
of
the
that.
same thing they're learning and then goes
yes,
deeper.
yes.
We've asked them though, we've asked our people to when they teach a holistic so when they get to their ELA,
they're more, they have something to say. They've got a toe. Exactly. I mean, exactly. So we don't know how it's going to work, but we're hoping that, you know, that they can do that front loading. Yes. So that when they hit the, a little more confidence, a little more, because there's nothing like, I mean, Darren's.
We do. It's because it's insane in there with the computer work and stuff that she has.
Twice as many notes this time because I had connections. The first time I was just kind of like, but then
that isn't going to happen. That
now
isn't
I've made
going to
a
happen.
connection and I can write
I'm
something.
tapped out there.
It's coherent. Yeah, so yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, that's nice.
I really like Walkers. I think we're coming up for an RFP probably year after next. And the newer version, the 2017 is I really like, and we have access to them.
And newcomers.
Right, so there's no program that does it all, but I think people will. Our people right now are just overwhelmed. Yeah, there's just so much. And I just keep, and then the ELs too, and they're like, oh my gosh, the ELD teachers, because they also teach the ELA. They teach the ELA and they teach the ELD. That's why I just said, it's just like any other curriculum. There's lots of things out there. What works for you and your students. You customize this. It's a supermarket. Right. Choose the things. You know, and what works for you and your kids isn't going to work. It's okay that somebody else is doing something different, and maybe you're emphasizing this and they're emphasizing that. But you as a teacher, you're the best resource they have, and then you know your needs. Yeah. And I just say stick with the scope and sequence, and try and stay with the pacing. You know, if you do those two things,
back principals are saying, I'm already seeing things.
They take the boundaries and they do that as a step.
And we've done some training before. Not that quality.
Yes.
And not for everybody was so excited, so happy about it.
So you're sitting on the road.
Yeah, well, I've got an appointment. I've got to get to. So then my husband's out there. I've been texting. Where are you? I will.
Say I love you, and I wish. I don't.
Do you want to chat?
Everybody's in line.
I have a question.
Okay.
My question is that first time that they become proficient and we have our meeting, we decide yes. And let's do that because just
that has to be within 30 days.
to fix it on my schedule.
We would hope because
you know, we don't want people then because of a glitch, then all of a sudden they're stuck in the same program that they were before.
Then they're going to be monitored. Then that's the first year. Then they're going to have second, 3, and 4.
Yep.
I had teachers or principals ask me, well, can we do that monitoring visit when we do, the secondary teacher asked me, can we do that when we do their, I don't even know what they call it. Yes.
Yeah, they actually do it. I mean, the thing that's interesting is Davis has like an incredible system with the counselors in relationship to monitoring them, and they have a whole system where it's coded electronically, and so they all know, and Proba does the same thing. So the big thing is just make sure that you don't lose track of them.
Because we need to get that
you can do it as long as you know that they have a plan. Look at the self-assessment tool, and it says exactly what the requirements are for maintaining a portfolio for them. Right? And that's pretty much it. So I trust you for doing that.
So whichever whichever time, because they're doing it this year, they're trying to do it during parent-teacher conferences.
That's good.
Because we're trying. We're trying. Yeah. And it was difficult to say, okay, so who's going to do, you have 25 of these in your school.
Right.
One ELD teacher is not going to be able to.
Oh, okay.
The ESL teacher in your junior
so
that's
so is the one that's on the waiting list in the high school?
We actually had 25 that were reclassified.
Okay, we got to get the high school kids in the program, and then the younger one just has to wait.
So we have not that were reclassified, but we have 25
Okay, but the question I have is if where is their home school and what's the family situation?
In the ESL plan it does. It says the only time you actually have
put the second grader on the newcomer
parents and everybody else is when they get 5.
When
they're exited.
They don't have to.
But I don't know what the family's asking. Because that's one thing I can think of.
It's when they
have
have to have the paperwork. Right. You have to have the paperwork. They have to have the paperwork in relationship to they met and they looked at it, because sometimes the problem is okay, the work that the kids actually producing shows well you need to do kind of you're exit you.
Awesome.
But you know that you're not writing very well. But that's only when they get a 5 and you're having that meeting to set up the support that you're providing for them. That's it.
That meeting, then that sheet doesn't go on to second, third, fourth.
No. So then we just have our own monitoring.
That's right.
Right.
Okay.
Because
My
other
district will be so happy.
Yeah, it's only when you hit the 5. Because we don't, we want to make sure that, you know,